Says we're live. Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee, and we have with us TrainerRoad and Cannondale's Amber Pierce.
Good morning, everyone.
We have our head coach, Chad Timmerman.
Hi, everybody.
And our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello.
The gang is back together, all of us, instead of the three amigos from last week. We have the whole crew here. Today, we're going to answer more of your cycling and triathlon-related questions today. We're going to go into a bunch of really cool stuff. We're going to talk about asthma. We're going to talk about doing some of the rapid-fire questions. We're going to get to those. We're going to talk about training for climbs at the end of races and how to approach that, whether it's through equipment or training, tons of stuff. It's going to be great. We're glad you're with us. First things first, though, a few thank yous that we need to give out. So first of all, happy birthday to the TrainerRoad Forum. Really exciting. It's by my measure, it seems like it's definitely the most active forum in cycling, but I could be wrong. Who knows? But it's a great place to be. Tons of people getting answers about how to get faster, asking their questions about it, sharing cool stuff. Really cool and supportive internet community, which is hard to find these days, which is pretty cool. So, and with that as well, we have to give a big thank you to the moderator on that forum. So first of all, we've had Bryce Lewis, who's one of our community managers. He was present on that. And now Ivy, she is awesome, our current community manager. She's so great. And one person that's really held the forum together and does so much work for it. He's not a TrainerRoad employee, and we don't pay him to do this. This is just something that he does. He's a great person. It's Chad McNeese. And we want to thank Chad McNeese for all of his hard work because he's on there moderating the forum, keeping track of things, always making it a better place. He's just great. So Nate, I'll pitch it over to you at this point.
Yeah, to give you an idea, so Chad McNeese, he has read 195,000 posts on the forum in 2 years, viewed 15.6 thousand topics, and he spent 65 days total reading it, which is insane, right? Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
So we announced this on the forum. Originally, we were going to do it on the podcast and the forum at the same time. We should have, but appreciate you so much, Chad. We are buying you a Trek travel trip of $5,000, and then we're doing $1,500 for flights. And once COVID's over, you get to go somewhere, bring somebody. If you want to go over that, we'll just pay the amount that we said, but that'd be cool. And Chad knows about this now. There's a forum thread. I posted it, and it took him like 12 hours to see it. And everyone's like, it's a surprise party. Like, because everyone else knew about it until Chad saw it. And I think it was he was doing some homework the one day that he wasn't on the forum all the time. But anyways, what he said is, and this is true, this is the key to a good gift. Something that somebody likes and wants to do, but normally wouldn't buy themselves. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's pretty cool. And I've heard really good things about those Trek travel trips. I haven't been on one before, but they do your bike and all that. Mm-hmm. We should have, thinking about it now, I should have talked to them. Probably would have got a discount because we're talking about on the podcast. But oh well. Good job, Trek. So they'll be really cool. So Chad, let us know how it is. And if you have a place, you've been on a really cool Trek travel trip, please go into the forum. And there's a 2-year anniversary forum thing in there, and let them know what you think you should do.
That's awesome. Chad, you've been on a Trek travel trip before, right?
Yeah, I went to the 100th anniversary of the Giro d'Italia.
How was it?
It was amazing. It was incredible. Yeah, it was a TR funded trip. So, kudos to TR. It was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had.
Saying Trek travel is hard for some reason for me, so I feel like it's totally like a sponsored forced read. So I'll just stop saying it. I apologize. It's definitely not sponsored. We have another thank you also to extend here, and this is to producer Tucker. So he's been the producer of the podcast and the producer of all of our YouTube videos, and he's done so much to help us and done an awesome job. He has a little one coming very soon, and he's also continuing his pursuit of his career in chiropractics and really in PT, physical therapy, rehab, the whole thing. So he's going to be moving on to do that. So we actually have a welcome as well, and you can't see him or hear him right now, but he's in our head, to producer Aaron, and he's a remote podcast listener from Santa Cruz, California. Aaron, we appreciate you, and this is your jam. Like, you are really good at this sort of stuff, so get ready for even better audio, better video, better experience with the live stream. I'm sure it's going to happen because Aaron's he's basically like the Johan Brunel of this sort of stuff. So he's the pro and knows how to organize and orchestrate it all. So Nate, we should talk about what you did recently. There's a stage race. I was actually signed up for it too, but some family stuff came up and I wasn't able to go, but it's the Pikes Peak Apex. It's a 4-day stage race around Pikes Peak, so in Colorado Springs, Colorado, which means that high elevation was definitely the case. A mountain bike stage race. It was, how did it go? We got to talk about this because this is a 4-day stage race, and Cape Epic obviously is a multi-day stage race, longer than this. Was it like Cape Epic, or what was the plan behind this?
I don't think it was like Cape Epic, but it was definitely to try to get a stage race like feeling in it. Originally, Sophia and Keegan were going to do it, and I was going to get to ride with Sophia there. But they are in Europe. I think they're racing. One of them's racing right now. I think Sophia's racing right at this moment. So no spoilers in the chat.
Yes, in the chat. But, no spoilers, please.
They're racing a World Cup, so they didn't make it. But I did get to ride with. I got to stay with Ryan Standish, who was also trainer employee, and Evelyn Dong. Evelyn got second in the GC, and Ryan got third in the GC. They both won a stage. I felt, man, they're so much faster than me too. I felt like I had greatness though in our Airbnb to have like stage winners with you, right? In a big race like that, because there's not much racing going on in the US. So all the top pros, if you weren't a pro if you're a pro mountain biker and you weren't in Europe, you're at that race, which is pretty cool. And they had really good COVID stuff too, where packet pickup was actually in your car, which would be nice for everything. They just walked the packet to your car. And then masks were required even in the start line until you moved up, and then they put you in boxes 6 feet apart, and then you could take your mask off. And then to use the aid stations, you had to have a mask. If you didn't have a mask, you couldn't use the aid station. So you had to carry one with you. And so all that stuff was pretty cool. And the race meeting was online and recorded, which I think they all should be online and recorded, because it's so hard to be a athlete and like, we have to go. It takes like 2 hours to go to a race meeting. You sit in like a gymnasium and it's annoying and all that. Mm-hmm. So yeah. So anyways, the race was pretty good. What question?
What did you learn? What did you learn?
Colorado is way harder than Reno. Colorado, it's everything. Okay. So let me just describe the race, because I think if you're a mountain biker in North America, this is a top race. It is amazing. It's 4 days. The first day is a prologue in Palmer Park. And that is like lots of rocks, not very technical, but a lot of climbing tech sections, which I am not used to, climbing up really steep rocks that are like kind of that have like sand on them and stuff. And it wasn't a fitness day at all. It was more like a cyclocross race, and technical skill was rewarded. And before, I pre-rode it with Ryan, who he won that stage, which was pretty cool. But there's like this little Moab section where it was kind of technical. And I always feel like this has happened so many times with me, and John, this happened with you, where I'm like, I don't feel comfortable riding that. And everyone's like, it's all in your head. You should just ride it, blah, blah, blah. And then I ride it and I crash, and then it messes me up. That happens over and over and over again. So I think I should just not do that in walk sections, because I crashed I crashed on that section on my right side. And then I didn't realize that if I was in my 52 on my, in the back, that the chain would get sucked in and get caught between like where your plastic disc should be, between your spokes.
Plastic disc should be because you bent your derailleur hanger, I assume.
Exactly. Yeah. So then I started the race, and I think I had 3 minutes of time just like trying to get that thing out, because it's hard to know where you're shifting. And some of the stuff was so steep that you needed to be in that gear. And I just kept sucking it in over and over again. So that was annoying. And anyways, that day I got smoked hard, and I was way back. So based on that day, they give you start positions. So I think out of 8 positions, I was in the 7th corral, which made it for the next days. I got to pass a lot of people on the fitness sections. And luckily, besides one day, it was all single track. So I'll just go quickly. I guess there was a competition between Noah and I. I didn't even know this until after stage 1. Noah and I are like, what's up, dude?
Yeah.
Like John is talking smack. Okay.
Yeah, let me explain this. So first of all, from the Successful Athletes podcast with Sparky, where we did Sparky Sears, we interviewed her, which she's mending with a broken leg, which is good news for Sparky, getting better from that. But her husband, Noah, is the one that she spoke about in that podcast. It's a great podcast. Y'all need to go and subscribe to the Successful Athletes podcast right now. It's awesome. This week, we actually talked to a guy who used TrainerRoad specifically to prepare for bike packing, which seems like, why in the world would I use these short indoor events to be able to prepare for that? And he saw huge gains. So really cool. And we have some great ones coming up here in the next few days. But anyways, Noah is a pro downhill rider. He was for years. And now he likes to ride gravel, XC, enduro, some downhill, kind of do a little bit of everything. And he uses TrainerRoad for all of his training. So it was Noah basically sent me a message beforehand. He said, can I beat Nate? And I was like, I mean, Nate's really fit right now, so maybe you can. But then everything started we built this thing up. It was actually the most paid attention to battle, I'm sure, in the whole world that day. So much larger than anything in the Tour de France, no doubt. So
I'll go quickly through this because I think a lot of people don't like long race reports. Sorry.
Sure.
Second day was lots of fire road stuff, and then a little bit of single track, and then more fire road, net uphill. The climbs are insane. It started with an hour-long climb, which is pretty crazy. And the next day started with a 2-hour climb, which is, it was a 23-mile climb on the next day of the stage 3. But so on stage 1, Noah beat me by 10 minutes. And on stage 2, I beat Noah by 10 minutes when it was fire roads. And we were within like 8 seconds of each other.
I'm telling you, it was the battle of the year.
I know. And then the third stage, it was that 2-hour-long climb, and then a 30-minute, like this, maybe 30-minute for the pros, descent. And in Colorado, they have something called scree, and they're like, oh, it's decompressed granite, it's DG. And I'm like, oh, we have DG. I've ridden DG a lot. It is not like Reno DG. It is like, it is pure on, if you're riding like a gravel bike or something, and sometimes they'll put in like actual gravel, where there's like drainage, or in the back end, you probably have this in your backyard in Reno where they put like DG and it's super thick and you just like swim through it. It's really hard to pedal through on a road bike. It's like that kitty litter. It's like somebody poured kitty litter on the whole trail. And even when you're going through they have like whoops on the trails. It's just trying to grab your front wheel and kill you. So I lost. I think he went literally twice as fast as me on that downhill. Noah did. And I switched to a front wheel to a tire to a Recon. I shouldn't have done that. The Recon rolls really slowly. I could tell the difference on that 2-hour climb. And whatever, people said this on Strava too. They're like, oh, you just needed bigger tires and you would ascend faster. That's not it, everyone. There's 2 parts of that. One, it's the scree, how like more, even a DHF doesn't really, you still slide around in it, right?
Can I ask you a question about your technique through there? Were you using your front brake?
I was using all the brakes, yeah, like every one of them.
That's one of the big problems with going through anything that's loose and deep like that. If you use your front brake, what happens is it causes your front end to plow, basically, and it causes it to pull up and to the left, depending on what sort of pitch you're on. So let's say you're on something that's like an off camber, and you're in something that's loose, and it's slanting downward from your right shoulder. Then that means that when you hit those brakes, it's going to want to pull your front end in many cases up and to the left. And it's really strange, and it causes a lot of instability. So when you get into ruts and a lot of stuff that's loose like that, you actually end up using your back brake a whole lot more. And you have to shift your weight bias as well. So then your back brake actually works, because if you're too far forward, then your back brake just doesn't work that much. But when you get into loose stuff, use your front brake sparingly. When you get into ruts, absolutely use your front brake sparingly. Because if you're in any sort of a rut or depression, it'll want to pull your front wheel up the sides of that whenever you use the brake. So
I never got to that like stage of descending. I am limited by fear, right? So no matter what tires I'm at, I'm not going to go any faster, because when I don't want the trail to go by any faster than a certain level. So when people say, oh, if you do this tire that rolls slower and has more grip, you won't care about everything going by you like just fast. I care a lot, right? So all it does is it slows me down on the climbs, and on the descents, I'm scared. And a lot of this stuff too, we went down this famous trail called like Captain Jack's, and it has like these like chutes and stuff. And I don't know what's going around that corner, if it's like a cliff or not. And there's like during the race, maybe 2 or 3 spots where you come around something and it's way tighter than you think, and there is a cliff. And I saw 2 people go off edges during this race. Not like Reno Cliff where you're going to die, but enough where like you're 10 feet down. And so that kind of, we've never really talked about this, but memorizing the trail and having a good trail memory is something that Keegan has. I do not have this. It looks all the same to me, and I can't remember. We went down some of the trails multiple times. So anyways, on that day, I crashed 4 times, every single time on my right side. And it was always in rock gardens. It's like I have my entire like right hip has like this road rash that's this big, and then I have bruises on bruises. And every day but day 2, I crashed on that right side. So it's like I'm like a tree where there's like different levels of rings of scratches, and then my scratches have crashes, and there's bruises of different colors. for each day, depending on where I did it. And then, so he beat me by a ton of time on that. And then the last day that was a really fun day. It was an XC day. I think it was like 90 minutes to 2 hours. And I put out a lot of power that day. I got stuck behind. We went to single track soon, got stuck behind it. For Rose Grands, I think on a 15-minute climb, I was like 45 seconds slower than her. And
nice.
So for everyone to know, because I say I'm bad, I'm not that bad. On Strava, these are well-ridden trails right in Colorado. So there might be 6,000 people who have done this. Ascending, like climbing, I'm usually about top 10%. Descending, I'm usually about top 20%. Okay.
Which is
but
good.
On this, it's not horrible. On this day, though, when I uploaded, I was like, oh, for the day, I got 74th. Only 74 people had uploaded that day. Right. And I was like, how can that happen? But I did so the next day I put Aspens back on that Captain Jack's going down we went down it 3 times total. And every time I got faster, I think I took over 15 minutes. I took a minute off of it. So nice. Here's what my takeaway is. If I really want to do this race fast, I should have ridden Palmer Park by myself early on. I could have really practiced some of those like really steep things where I got stuck and I had to like run up. And 2, Captain Jack's, if I would have done that a few more times and known like, okay, in this shoot, you can just go. If I was really smart, I'd probably record it ahead of time and then just watch it a few times. But it was like, it only means something to you, John. It was like coaster. And so if you just knew where everything was going to be, you could go a lot faster. And it's a very fun trail. Basically, I think we should the 4 of us, we should do this race next year. It is so much fun. And each day, the cool part about it was, depending on what type of mountain biker you were, each day had something different and different skills were rewarded each day. So whoever had the most all around was most well-rounded would do a good job. And nothing was like going to kill you technical. It was just like, this is tricky technical. Where single track 6, they were trying to kill us.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I mean, that's a good race too, but that's way harder.
I already have my entry that was supposed to go toward this year transferred over to next year. So it's there. It's just, it might be tricky with single track 6 because that's my main goal is nationals next year, then single track 6. And it's, I think, just a week and a half separating the 2 of them. So
Amber, Chad, do you want to go?
Yeah.
It's really fun. And if COVID is over, what I want to do is have a TrainerRoad party afterwards. Like get food, get some kegs, like mountain bike party will be really fun.
Party.
The thing that I really was trying to find out is like, how was my fitness over 4 days? And I was fine. It's that kilojoules that I did on these days were actually very similar to TrainerRoad workouts. Sometimes they're even less than a TrainerRoad workout. I had my most power on the last day. I think I did this is from 6,000 to 10,000 feet, but I was in the 350s for 10 minutes or something, but it was pretty good. So I'm not worried about that. And I'll just continue what I'm doing for training and let the power go up.
Way to go, Nate. I like that.
Yeah.
But you're putting in you're putting in the miles, so to speak. That's a bad idiom to use here, but you're basically going through and testing things out just as they will be tested or trying to do so for Cape Epic.
Basically this race was 2 clicks up on my skill level, and it definitely made me better. Technical climbing up, I am so much better. We don't have a lot of that in Reno, at least that I know about. And that it was a huge skill improvement on that.
Sweet. Awesome. Okay. A couple things. Also, if you want to train with Nate, he mentioned his group workouts. You can find him on Instagram at tr.nate. And he's always sharing the different workouts that he's going to do with TrainerRoad group workouts on there, and tons of people join him. It's lots of fun. Also, you can find all of us on Instagram right now. You can just look on YouTube if you join us that way, and you can see all the different stuff that we have there. Okay, so a few things. Let's actually just jump right into Derek's question, and then we'll get into some business, and we'll kind of intersperse it throughout the podcast. But Derek's question, he says, "Hey, TR fam, thank you for creating such a valuable product and community. Since starting TrainerRoad in February, my FTP has gone from 243 to 324. Holy cow." And he mentions that is as of September. Way to go. That's great. Yeah. It says, "I'm getting closer to my long-term goal of 5 watts per kilogram and now sit at 4.6. My weight is 70.5 kilograms. So I ride 4 days a week for a total of 7 to 10 hours of pedaling on average. So that's usually like what we see for a high volume rider. If you're following a high volume plan, that's like what you would need in terms of structured time following a TrainerRoad plan." It says, "I'm not currently following a plan. but with a history in gravity racing, decided to stick to base and build phase for this year. And it's also worth saying that isn't currently following a plan just because he finished his plan progression. He was following a plan all the way up to this. I happen to know who Derek is. So he followed a plan to get to where he is. He just right now currently isn't.
He's in between plans.
There we go. I like it. Way to go, Chad. He says, I also strength train 2 times a week, which I believe has been a huge reason for progress without excessive volume. And this is true. This is his job. It's Derek Teal at Dialed Health on Instagram. He's a strength trainer specifically for cyclists. So it's his job to do strength training and to help people with this. And he does in-person training too. So when he mentions 2 times a week, I think he's probably actually doing a little bit more, whether it's for filming new video segments or anything else like that. He's doing a lot, but the dude's jacked and he happens to have an allergy to wearing a shirt too. If you go on Instagram, you can see that. I don't blame him. I'd probably do the same thing if I looked like him. So he says, another detail, I haven't missed a workout all year. Not one. I literally mean that. So my question is, do you think it's possible to reach my goal without an increase in volume? So he asked this question here, and this is the thing that a lot of us bump up against, right? Where we hit a plateau. So we think, oh, the answer is more. Like if I do more, then I'll be able to do that. And here's another like bit of information on Derek. Derek has, I believe, a 1-year-old little boy, and he has twins coming along the way. So Derek doesn't exactly have the luxury of time running his own business and doing all of that. So if you're listening to this, this is probably pretty relatable to a lot of us here with a lot of responsibilities on our plate. So just adding more probably isn't a feasible option for Derek either, because his time is going to get really crazy once he has 2 little ones in addition to the current one. Okay, with all of that, here's the perspective that I have on this. I'm going to rephrase what Derek said in another way. Okay. He's saying, I've been doing everything perfectly and seeing huge gains. For that to continue, should I change absolutely everything about what I'm doing? I know that sounds silly, but how many times have all of us done that, right? Where we're like, everything is working, we're doing great, we're seeing improvements. And then we see like one small thing that we say like, okay, I must have plateaued, throw out everything I've done. Let's restart and reassess. When really the chances are it's probably like, maybe have you even plateaued? It's probably a good thing to question, right, Chad?
Yeah. So as a coach, that'd be the first thing I'd ask him. As an athlete, that's the first thing you need to ask yourself. I mean, have you even plateaued? If you haven't, if you're still on the ascendancy, well, why would you change anything? I mean, if it's not broke, don't try to fix it. And I understand the compulsion. I'm going really well. I want to keep on going really well. This is going to run out at some point. I need to fix this now, but don't fix it until it's evident that something isn't working anymore. First off, maximize anything that's working for you, as long as that makes sense. I mean, if it's even reasonably in line with your goals, if it's working, keep on doing it. Like for example, block periodization, it's seldom necessary. At times it is necessary. In most cases, and Derek, this probably still applies to you, blended training is effective. And yeah, you're dabbling in so many different energy systems, and it seems like, how can I keep elevating all of them? But you've made it clear that you're not going backwards yet. You haven't even leveled off. So it still makes sense. Keep on doing it. And then just look at, I mean, if everything that you need to have be reliable in race scenarios or whatever your events are, those are your relevant energy systems. And if you're touching on them, they're at least being maintained. And then, focus on the ones that are more important, but don't feel the need to place added emphasis unnecessarily or prematurely. It's so easy to overthink this.
So it's more about getting more out of what you're currently doing, right? Like what you're doing right now. First of all, if you continue to do that, you'll probably still see improvement. But this is an interesting topic for all of us, how to get more out of what we're doing currently and what we can do. Right, Chad?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Nate's a good example of sweet spot being effective. So it was working for him, so he kept doing it. And it kept working for him, so he kept doing it. I mean, I don't even know, Nate, you tell us, did you have to change your volume substantially, or did you just start doing longer intervals? I mean, what did you change to keep you on that upward trend?
Just high volume. Yeah. And actually, I don't know, I overtrained and stuff too. I did the opposite. I wanted more gains faster. So I did too much. And then I kind of fell off a cliff, and I fell into the trap that you said not to. I think I would have been faster at this moment if I would just be consistent year round, and keep increasing.
Very probably. So he had something that was working for him, and he maintained it to some extent, but to some extent he also changed it. And that's where things started to break down.
Yeah. I think that like for a lot of us, we can probably look at low hanging fruit. I know Derek is very disciplined in his nutrition. I know that his sleep is probably where he has like a big opportunity for improvement. When you have a young child, it's really tough, like, because you don't get to choose your sleep schedule in many cases. That gets interrupted and it's really dictated by something else, especially with twins on the way. I don't know how he will sleep. So, but at the same time, that's like one spot. So finding low hanging fruit, Chad, is probably like a good way to look at things if you want to really increase that ramp rate.
Yeah, and also more when whatever was working for you stops working for you. That's when you start to think just a little outside of that box. And you don't have to go as far as lab testing. I mean, there's no reason why not if you can afford it and you want to spend the time doing that. But you probably know what's holding you back. Am I really weak when I have to work above threshold for a couple minutes at a time? Am I really weak when I have to work just slightly below threshold for many minutes at a time? So you can shift your emphases based on what you know is maybe something you struggle with, and you recognize that struggling with that actually affects your performance negatively. And when it comes to these forms, at least what I consider to be these forms of low hanging fruit, strength training is probably the first thing. And we're very clear that Derek has that box checked. The long ride, I'm guessing he's doing it, but considering he's a parent and he's got another couple of youngsters on the way, that long ride is probably going to be a taller and taller order. We'll see. Intensity, if he's following our training plans, then yeah, he's probably checking that box as well. And then longer intervals. So this is probably the easiest fix, or not fix, but change when things start to stall a bit, is take the same intervals you're already doing, the same durations of the workouts you're already doing, and just figure out how to change the composition within those confines. You know, your 2-minute VO2 max intervals become 2.5s. Your 10-minute sweet spot efforts become 12s or 15s or even 20s, that sort of thing. And then form work. This is underrated too frequently, is people don't recognize how biomechanically inefficient they are, how they lack coordination. And we did touch on this last week when we talked about strength training and how strength training benefits coordination, but coordination benefits coordination. You can do it via speed work. You can do it via simple repetition. You can do it simply by focusing on what you're doing, saying, am I riding my bike well right now? I'm doing the same sweet spot workout I've done 4 other times, but this time I'm really going to focus on trying to make it feel easier by pedaling a little more smoothly.
I want to debunk another thing that we bump up against a lot of the time. Whether you cracked the nut to get to 3 watts per kilogram or 4 watts per kilogram, whatever it is, a lot of the time we think, well, yeah, my training has gotten me sub 3, but once I get to 3, I got to train totally differently, right? And we think that like we're stuck at 4.8 watts per kilogram forever, asking for a friend, of course, and stuck at 4.8, and we can't get to 5. When I get to 5, I've got to train totally differently. Your body has no clue. Like it doesn't know
where
the
those
difference
delineations
between 4.8. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like it doesn't care when you're at 5 versus 4.8. But we're really good at drawing those delineations, because we see data and we see benchmarks and we see landmarks that we're reaching for. So when we reach those, a lot of the time it's tempting to think that everything will be different. But more often than not, the answer is just sticking with structure. And when you drift from structure, that's when things do have to change. But many times if you just stick with structure, kind of like what you were saying, Nate, like if you had been more consistent, right, you might be ahead of where you are right now.
It's water cutting stone, as a great mind once said on this podcast. What people don't realize too is, okay, you go from 300 to 310 to 320, and you keep the same hours and the same TSS. That is relative to your FTP. So you're actually doing more kilojoules and having more stress on your body. That is a stepped increase in stress. So when you say, oh, I need more volume, you are doing more kilojoules. That's more volume, right?
More work,
during that
yeah.
time. And you don't necessarily have to extend the duration. You are raising the amount of watts you're doing. And like you can get I think there is a maximum amount of hours that you can take as a normal person, and it might be around 10. Like I'm getting more and more to the thought of when I push myself over 10 hours, things like something falls apart. Like either TrainerRoad drops off, my family drops off, or my cycling fitness drops off. But if I am more consistent over the whole year, I'll be farther ahead. And I want to say something else about Derek. So I'm on his Instagram. Dude is chiseled. His pecs have like shadows. Like I don't have that. That's pretty good. He's not hugely jacked like a CrossFit person, but Derek, you got some. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but your upper body weight, if you lost upper body mass, like smaller pecs and smaller arms, that's probably not helping you push the pedals at all. I don't think it's a limiter based on what you look like. You could probably lose weight and hit your 5 watt per kilo or be very, very close to it. And still maintain your leg muscle and all that sort of stuff. But because of his job, it's probably not an option. They don't want him to look like a Chris Froome, right? Upper body.
He could look just like
T-Rex.
a cyclist, Eric. Isn't that appealing?
Yeah. But that would be a very...
You're going to want to leave your shirt on after that.
Yeah. But I mean, that is an option for a lot of people. And when I am strong, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm 6'6", and if I have a whole bunch of upper body mass, it's easy to gain an extra 10, 20 pounds. And then it's really hard. You got to be really, really strong to be able to hit 5 watts per kilo and have muscle like upper body mass at the same time. That is actually, do you guys know anybody who's like that? Who's kind of jacked upper body? I can only think of rowers. Rowers get there, but it's pretty unique.
Top cross country mountain, like Nino Schurter isn't a small person. He's pretty strong. He's not like a rower, like what you're talking about, but
yeah.
But he doesn't look like an emaciated road cyclist for sure.
There's cycling jacked, and then there's jacked, right?
Yes.
And Derek is more than cycling jacked, but he's not like, CrossFit jacked or like bodybuilder jacked.
Also, one thing to keep in mind too, with the sort of riding that Derek does, he does like it's like a lot of road or a decent amount of road. Actually, not that much road. It's a whole lot of like trail and enduro because he's also a pro was a pro downhill racer who, by the way, if you ever get a chance to ride with Derek, you totally should. I learned more following him, which Chad and I rode with him not long ago. I learned more following Derek than I have following any other rider. He has like a level of finesse that's just like next level. He's very good at that sort of thing. So with that kind of skill and everything else that he has as well, in many cases, the limiter for a road cyclist going over to mountain biking, they need to do strength training because that will enable them to descend better, right? Like it's actually a limiter that affects their descending. And with Derek, I feel like you're mentioning, Nate, he's probably on the other end of the spectrum there. And with the skill that he has, he can probably drop down really far. I don't want to say this because I'd race him at national championships. And if Derek gets really fit, I don't know how I would beat Derek ever because he is so good on a bike. But if he did that and dropped himself down, like you said, on muscle mass, that could be a good thing. So, I mean, really, that's talking about the low-hanging fruit, right, Chad? Like what you're doing and then finding ways where you can optimize.
Yeah, I mean, I seem like it, but weight loss is one of the easy gets because you don't really have to do anything. You just have to eat less. And that's uncomfortable and it's challenging in its own ways, but it doesn't mean, well, I was going to say it doesn't mean any suffering. There is a bit of suffering there, but really it can be behavioral modification. So you can just figure out small tweaks and lose that weight also incrementally over, a pretty long stretch of time. You might not even feel it. And I mean, we're talking strength to weight here, weight being one part of that equation. So the weight goes down, then that ratio improves.
And for most of us listening to this, if we're losing weight, hopefully, all of us probably feel like we have some body fat to lose. I don't think Derek has any to lose, according to the picture.
I was going to say, maybe not eating less, just like fewer bicep curls. I don't know.
Yeah. But the for
instead
him,
of put down the fork, it's put down the weights.
Yeah, exactly. For him, it would probably be pretty darn unpleasant because he'd be breaking down muscle and utilizing muscle as fuel. And basically that would be how he drops some weight. So, I mean, it's unpleasant for everybody, but that's definitely a one perspective on it. Nate, were you going to say something? I don't know if I cut you off.
I just think that if he's racing enduro, he probably doesn't want to lose the upper body strength. It's probably making him faster, but man, a 5 watt per kilo enduro rider, is that very common? I don't think so.
He could,
I can't think of one.
If he was still in that mindset, he would be destroying enduro right now, like at a very high level.
Because there's pedaling during the stage. That's what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's tons of fitness. And if you can get yourself to 5 watts per kilo and then have repeatability and you're an enduro racer, watch out everybody else. Like, unless you're really bad at descending, watch out because you will really be able to put some time on people. So I guess another way to look at this too is some people may be doing this training, like you mentioned, Nate, they may be getting in their 10 hours and kind of pushing up against the logistical limits in their life. Like they can't really add any more because family or work would suffer. And if you're doing that, I still think there's probably, you can not even change the work you're doing, but you can actually absorb more when you are making sure you're recovering more effectively. Like if you were, let's say, and I know that this is unrealistic, but let's say you did the same exact 6-week training block, right? And you followed that 6 weeks and you slept terribly. You got 6 hours of sleep at max, but you were less than that all the way through that 6 weeks. Then let's say that you were somehow able to have the same starting point and do that 6 weeks again. But that time you got 9 hours of sleep every night and you were able to do that. I guarantee you that you're actually going to see more improvement out of your body when you're able to recover more, even though you're doing the same work. You're actually getting more out of it.
You're nurturing the adaptive response. And that's yet another form of the low-hanging fruit I'm talking about. And maybe it isn't low-hanging, maybe he's already addressed this, but if you haven't looked at the recovery side of this equation, you may not need more volume. You may just need to improve the other side of things, which is the recovery and therefore the adaptation. And he mentions, so apparently I'm guessing this took place on social. Some people threw some suggestions at him, and he says that others suggest the addition of recovery modalities like diaphragm deep tissue work, hot cold therapies, and more. To which a couple general things I'd like to say on the matter of these additional recovery modalities, but it also finally granted me an opportunity to talk about something that I've been trying to weave in for a long time. So going to do a little bit of a deep dive on one little thing because it shines a light on something that I don't think a lot of people have considered. First off, regarding recovery modalities, is they're often the icing on the cake. And I'm not talking about sleep and nutrition and nutrient timing and the obvious things. Those are by far icing. That is the cake. That's the recovery cake. Those are time tested and proven, but the jury's really out on so many of those other things. And even if there is some research to support them, there's probably as much to refute them. In any case, they're inconsistent. Some do work though. I'm not trying to poo-poo all these things. I mean, the compression boots, there are things, but I do want people to keep in mind that when you start to delve into those or wade into those waters, we're talking about marginal gains here, and marginal gains are for when margins matter. You save them for when you need to be concerned with the little things, when you've maximized all the obvious things, all the low-hanging fruit we're talking about right now. So kind of on that note, he mentions deep diaphragm deep tissue work. Probably, maybe, I don't know. It's one of those, the risk to reward ratio is so even that, you're not going to do any damage in the process. You might not reap a big benefit, but if there's anything there, I don't know if you've ever dug around in your diaphragm before, but if you hook your hands underneath your rib cage and start feeling just how tight that is, you should be able to really get your fingertips in there. If your diaphragm is tight, it's painful to try to even get just the first digit in there. You can also notice, and I've done this, imbalances, tighter on the right side than the left side. What's going on there? And that can be anything from hip alignment to shoulder alignment to, you're riding your bike a particular way. Maybe you need a shim. Maybe you have a left-right leg length discrepancy. Who knows? It could be a bit of insight into something that does actually matter. But I saw diaphragm and it was ding, ding, ding. Oh, now I can finally talk about something. So a few times in the past, I think I've even kind of shot down the idea that the respiratory muscles can be a limiter to endurance performance. It's like, come on, your diaphragm doesn't fatigue. If your diaphragm fatigued, you'd stop breathing, you die. It's like having your heart fatigue. So it's not realistic. Turns out, and I've known this for quite some time, but again, haven't really had the opportunity to weave it in less than obviously. Not that this isn't obvious, but the respiratory, let's just shut up and move on. The respiratory muscles can in fact be limiting. Okay. These muscles can fatigue and they don't fatigue in the sense that they stop working. So let's think in terms of the diaphragm, because that's what we're talking about here. It's not going to inhibit hyperventilation. I mean, if you're deep into an interval and you're huffing and puffing and those muscles are starting to cook, or your diaphragm in particular, it's not going to stop. You're going to keep on hyperventilating, but you're going to trigger something called a metaboreflex that is a response to your fatiguing diaphragm. When this happens, you get this sympathoexcitation. So your sympathetic system, the fight or flight system, our exercise response system revs up. Vasoconstriction in the exercising limb starts to take place, start to close off those blood vessels that are feeding the muscle. And this reduces the blood flow to those working muscles. So, and you think about it, when your diaphragm's tired and these muscles are still asking of high demand from the diaphragm, I mean, what's the body's response? It wants to preserve homeostasis. So it's going to start to restrict blood flow. It's going to start to limit what you can do because the diaphragm effectively says so. So basically, a cooked diaphragm leads to reduced muscular capacity. You simply can't do as much. So I haven't defined it yet, but the metabolic reflex is basically when metabolic conditions in the muscles relay signals to the brain, and this influences physiologic goings on. So some metabolic change in the muscle tells the brain, we can't do this much longer. The brain says, okay, I'm going to start to shut down resources. So, and this is on the physiological side. There's also psychological effects, and this has been pretty well researched too. There's a summary of respiratory limitations on endurance, and it's not titled that, but I did provide the link back in 2008 by Dempsey and colleagues. And one of the things they did within this study was they used a mechanical ventilator, and they reduced the inspiratory muscle work by substantially, by 40 to 60%. So basically they're assisting the diaphragm, and it reduced the diaphragm fatigue and therefore reduced the rate of rise in rate of perceived exertion, what they termed limb discomfort during exercise. So it didn't feel as hard. So you tell me, can you keep on riding at a high level if you're not feeling pain, if those messages aren't reaching the brain because they're not being sent? And in this case, performance time improved by it was 14% plus or minus 4, so 10 to 18%. That's a heck of a lot. So they hung in there for that much longer because they just felt better about it. Their muscles didn't hurt as bad. They weren't barking at them. And then other studies have shown there are various ways they used various ways to reduce the work of breathing during high intensity exercise. And they prevented some percentage of exercise induced fatigue. So this isn't the only example. This has been supported elsewhere. So the nerve endings in the muscles actually depolarize when they're exposed to certain things. So whether it's coming endogenously and it's happening as a response to exercise, or they can actually inject in experimental circumstances lactic acid, arachidonic acid, potassium, all things that are released in increasing quantities depending on the intensity of exercise. Sometimes they'll even inject capsaicin, so the spiciness or the spicy component of red peppers. And what they find is they depolarize. So what that means is that there's nerve activity. So there's afferent or neural feedback from the muscle to the brain. And then that feedback is fed forward and leads to central regulation. The brain is now deciding to limit the muscles, what I just said. So to put it another way, peripheral change or change in the muscle provides signals to the nervous system. And this evokes a central response in the brain, whereby the brain inspires peripheral muscle fatigue. So it's like feed forward, feedback, feed forward, feedback. I mean, it's this constant relationship, which is interesting because we're always talking about, is fatigue in the brain? Is fatigue in the muscle? Is it a combination of the two? Honestly, I'm not sure it matters. And as Dempsey points out in this study, the real mystery is what are the things that trigger these muscle limitations? Let's find out what those are. Who cares whether we're feed forwarding, feeding back? It doesn't matter. Let's figure out what those are. Let's address those. Let's figure out how to train those limitations. And then in terms of the diaphragm itself, it fatigues in its own way, and it elicits this metabolic reflex. And therefore, poorly conditioned respiratory muscles can, in fact, limit our endurance performance. And I know the obvious question then is going to be, well, how do I train these muscles? And quite honestly, learn to use them. I mean, you don't need to go out and buy these fancy gizmos. I mean, that may be something you eventually need to do because you want to condition them further. You figured out that is, in fact, a limitation on your performance. But in the most case, people don't breathe well. And this is why without so many of the workouts, I push the whole belly breathing thing. And it's not like something I picked up in Pilates, though that is where I initially learned it. It's because I've recognized that the breathing muscles need to do the breathing work. We restrict it too much when we don't understand how to effectively breathe. So first and foremost, learn how to use your diaphragm.
This is an interesting point because if you are training regularly, chances are you're using your breathing muscles, but there's probably room for you to improve it. If you're a sedentary individual, you probably have a whole lot of room to improve it, right? But if you're training and you're following that sort of stuff and you follow Chad's workout text, you're going to be in a good place. Nate, you're smiling. I don't know if you want to chime in with something.
I was going to change the subject slightly, but go back on Derek.
Please.
So
Please do. Okay. Let's go back.
Derek, I have also been wanting to weave this in. It's been on the dock for a while, but there's another way for Derek to lose weight.
Oh, boy.
Before I was doing a race, and I thought, so here's what Keegan Swenson, who is racing right now, And I saw somebody already put one message in the chat. Stop it, please.
Do not
don't
that,
do anything.
Please.
I know.
It's cruel.
You get banned from TrainerRoad for life. Just kidding. So what Keegan is all about is doing a low fiber diet leading up to the really big races, or during a stage race doing a low fiber diet. Because the thinking is, while you have a high fiber diet, there is waste that gets put in your intestinal tract that just sits there and then actually gains weight. And Keegan, he's a pretty small guy. He can lose 2 to 3 pounds by doing a low fiber diet leading up to his race. Okay, that makes sense so far? Mm-hmm. So what I thought is, well, why not take a laxative to just have the 5 fiber diet and then get everything out, right? Because that's what you want to do, is you're trying to empty your intestinal tract so that you have less weight for the big race. So I sent my wife, and she went to CVS and brought home a whole bunch of laxatives. And the one that I tried was called Dulcolax. And you can go from 1 to 3 tablets. You take it at night, in the morning, you're supposed to be good. So I thought, well, I better start at 2. And so I took 2, and they work 100%. But what happens, I actually lost 4 pounds within like 2 hours. It is crazy. They worked, but it had like this systemic feeling over my body where I worked out, and the workout was so hard, like it was not worth it. And I almost felt like slightly hungover with those kind of pills. I was like shaky and I felt weak. So I do not recommend it, but it does work. I mean, it gets Derek halfway to his 5 watts per kilo. So what I'm thinking of now, and Amber, I want your feedback if this happened to pros. So you can't do systemic. So there's two other ways you could do it. You could do Miralax, which is like kind of like this synthetic thing that you drink and it makes sure stuff moves through, or a suppository. Because I don't think a suppository is systemic. I'm not really sure on that though. And I would think that if you're in a big race, or what's the colon cleanse where they like hook a tube up and they like, what's that called? And they shoot everything out. No one knows.
Enema.
Yeah, you can do it. You can go to like a place though, and they'll like really clean out your intestinal tract pretty far. I can't believe that that's not a thing more in cycling, because you can think of how much we pay to get a pound off our bike, right?
Yeah.
And if you could get 4 pounds off your bike and you just had to go and pay a couple $100 maybe or less to go do that. Anyways, I don't recommend taking laxatives before a race. That's pretty much the point of that. Amber, did you ever hear of anyone doing a suppository or anything like that to like lose weight before a big stage?
No, I didn't. I mean, hydration, electrolyte balance, those are all things that are really, really important. So that's just not something that you're going to want to mess with, especially that close to a race. I'm not aware of anyone doing that. It's not to say that nobody does it, but it really doesn't sound like a very good idea.
That's why I think a suppository might work.
It's a nice way to put it.
Somebody should try it. And
Nate, I think Nate, you seem like a great candidate for it.
Well, I mean, before that,
and let us know.
2-hour climb that I did, that would have been nice to be like 2 pounds, 3 pounds lighter, right?
Sure.
So,
everyone needs water.
Oh, you can still drink water, Chad.
And that has to be tremendously dehydrating. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
I don't know what the suppository is. Or if you couldn't just hydrate more by drinking a little bit more water.
Yeah.
Anyways, Derek, that's another option that you have on the table.
Before we leave this question though, I would like to just pause and take a moment, because Derek said that he didn't miss a single workout for an entire year. And I don't want to gloss over that, because the fact that he's a dad, he has a family, he's running his own business, and he's training, and he managed to have that level of consistency, that's hard to do. I mean, that's hard for anybody. So I just want to take a moment and say, you're doing something right. And probably to attain that level of consistency, you're having to do a whole lot of things right. Like you're getting adequate recovery. You have a really good support system. You're managing the logistics and practicalities of your life well. I mean, what it takes to have all of those things converge and result in that kind of consistency that's really hard to do. So part of me wants to say, like, you're doing a lot of things really, really right, and you're getting lots of gain. So I'm not sure I would really mess with this equation too much until like Chad said at the very beginning, you clearly have a plateau or something is clearly going wrong. Because from where I stand right now, it doesn't really seem like anything's going wrong with what you're doing.
Very well wrapped up, Amber. Very well said.
Perfectly. And we haven't outright answered it. His question was, do you think I can reach it? Absolutely. You're so close. I mean, you're knocking on the door, you're 0.4 grams per kilo away from it. And like Amber just pointed to, you're doing so many things right. So just keep on keeping on.
This is like, you come home with 99% on a test and you're like, but what about that 1%?
Well, definitely don't do whatever got you to 99. Throw that out the window.
Right. And just keep in mind, I mean,
it's got to be polarized.
Rate of
yeah, exactly.
just throw everything out the door.
Low cadence intervals all day. That's what I get.
The rate of progress that you're making may change and it may fluctuate. So you may not see the same kind of gains at the same rate. That doesn't mean that you're not going to get to where you want to go maintaining this level of consistency. And my best guess is that like maintaining this consistency will be the main thing that gets you to where you want to go, as opposed to making little marginal gain tweaks here and there.
There's nothing that is more impactful in a person's performance than consistency, at least from our perspective. That thing in terms of like that has greater impact. If you're more consistent, you will see more improvement. That's just how it goes. So Derek, you've actually found the holy grail, which is discipline. It's not like you found it, or it's just discipline, and you have your priorities straight with that. So if you can hold on to that, you'll be good. Let's go into Dom's question. He says, hey, everyone, I'm 46, 75 kilograms, and I have an FTP of 270, and I live in beautiful Yorkshire, England. I beg to differ after seeing world champs there. It looks like you basically live in a bathtub from last year. That was miserably cold and wet looking. He says, it's very green and very hilly. I've been a TrainerRoad disciple since 2013, and I need to say thanks to you all for being the daily support I need. I don't race. I just use TrainerRoad so I can enjoy riding my bike and hopefully stay alive for longer. So my question is this. I struggle with steeper climbs that come late in a long ride. I know the immediate answer to this statement is, don't we all? And yes, don't we all, right? Nate's shaking his head. He's like, I'm fine. I have no issues. But he says, is there a particular approach to training that can improve this scenario, eradicate the dread of a late climb, and prevent the total collapse in form and power towards the end of a ride? With 3 young children, I only have time for 4-hour-long workouts a week with a 4 to 5 hour ride at the weekends. And I'm currently on sweet spot base level 1. So that's actually a really good amount of training right there. If you can train 4 times a week for an hour and then 4 to 5 hours, bam, you have a lot to work with there. So he says, many thanks, 5 stars. My life would be very different without you. All the best in these tough times. Thanks, Dom. That feels great.
Can I start with this one? Because this is the thing that I do better in any race. Always at the end of the race, I am passing people. And at the Fire Road race, actually on all the Pikes Peak stuff besides the first day, at the end of the race, I have relative to other people, we're all going to go down, right? But relative to other people, I am passing so many more people at the end of a race. And it feels so good. It gets you in this great mindset when you set it up. And there's 2 things. One is pacing at the beginning, but the biggest thing is nutrition. And at the end of the race, I tell people, I was even with some pros and they're like, how much are you eating per hour? And I was like, oh, like 120 grams of carbs. And one of the guy, Cody, who fell apart later on in the race, was like, that's insane. I can't imagine that. And it is something you need to train and you need to practice it in order to absorb that. But if you can do that the whole race, at the end of the race, there's so much more like, chutzpah, I don't even say, like you have this kind of like feeling inside of you that when you start passing people too, and everyone's falling off like flies, it is motivating. And you also, this happens to me, is I say, wow, the race is only 30 minutes to the end. Like there is a whole nother level of, if you are passing people, there's in your 30 minutes of the end, a whole nother level of motivation that you get. Where the opposite, oh man, it's 30 minutes to the end, I'm dying and everyone's passing me. That is the opposite, right? You just want it to be over. You want to like back off and let go of the pain. The other big thing, I think that really helps me on this, 2-hour TrainerRoad rides. Spinning for 2 hours consistently without any breaks. A lot of riders don't do that. And the amount of muscular endurance, especially with sweet spot that I have compared to what I used to have, makes it so at the end of even like 4 hours of outside riding, my legs aren't fried, right? And if I have systemic like nutrition inside of me, I can't go over threshold, but I can go right up to threshold and just keep it there for a long time.
Yeah, it's so nutrition is absolutely the biggest thing that I've noticed as well. If you find this is all of us think that we eat enough, but just like we talk about taking some time to measure things with like MyFitnessPal, that brings a level of awareness to you where you go, oh wow, okay. So when Nate's talking about grams of carbs per hour taken in, we usually, like, a lot of people refer to 90 as like this theoretical limit that the body can absorb. However, that's being disproven with time. Now we're seeing the fact that people can process more than that. And I usually aim for somewhere around 110, 115 grams of carbs per hour. What that looks like in terms of what I'm taking out on the bike, and everybody should actually look at this when you ride, write down what you ate and then look at it, or what you drank, what you took in, and then look at it over the time of the ride. And you'll be surprised. You're probably not taking in that many at all. So what that looks like for me is a bottle of mix an hour. And that bottle of mix is going to have, I don't know, somewhere around 80 grams of carbs in that bottle that I'll be drinking. And then in addition to that, I'll be taking in a gel that's going to give me somewhere around 30 grams, 35 grams of carbs that I'll be taking in, 40 grams. Depends if I can get all the gel out of the package while going through bumps. But that's about 35 grams of carbs. So then I add that on, and then I may even be taking in, sipping on another bottle thereafter. So it ends up getting to the point where if I continually take that in, and like Nate said, you have to train with it, it's not only that you feel that you don't fade in the race. Like Nate said, it's actually a big motivation increase, because there's a difference. Like when you're depriving your body of glycogen and you're wearing it down, not only does your physical performance suffer, but your mental performance suffers substantially, and your motivation really gets hurt. And if you're looking at anything like a stage race, the worst thing you want to do is have a bad stage or bad finish to a stage. I don't know if you've noticed that, Amber, but like when you have a good finish to a stage, like that momentum really helps on the following day. And the same thing goes, treat every week of training like a stage race. From workout to workout that you do, when you end a workout on a really strong note, man, it feels good. Have you noticed that, Amber? At least like in your experience with stage racing and everything else like that? Because being a domestique, you probably had to run yourself into the ground repeatedly. So
yeah, you don't. I mean, it's always better to end a day strong and on a high note, because yeah, you don't have to spend that mental energy of like digging yourself out of an emotional hole when you're done with the race. The other piece of it, I mean, the competitive side of me will just say, like, there is no better feeling in a race than suffering, but at the same time knowing that the people around you are probably suffering at least incrementally less than you are. Like that kind of suffering can actually feel good. So if you're eating well at the beginning of the race and you're pacing appropriately, and you can be that person that's suffering less at the end of the race, it's a pretty motivating sensation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Chad,
and what I find especially mystifying about this, and I'm going to let the self-criticism fly, is that it's such an easy thing to hone. I mean, everything we put into our mouths on a ride is really easy measurable. One scoop of this powder is this many grams. One gel, it says right on the package, is this many grams. One bar, one bag of blocks. I mean, you know for a fact. I mean, when you sit down and you have a cheeseburger and French fries, you can kind of guess at what you're getting, but you know specifically how many grams of carbohydrate are going into the system. So if you need to figure out, do I need 60? Do I need 80? Do I need 100? It's a matter of eating one more gel and seeing how things go. So it's such an easy thing to dial that nobody, myself included, has an excuse for not getting it right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other thing too, John, people have been listening to a long time. You used to be like, I'm fussy. I can't do it. 60 is my limit, all this sort of stuff. And then was it Leadville? What was the thing that switched you over to be able to eat a lot?
It was training with it. It was treating even the hour-long workouts. Like, I know, everybody, I don't need to fuel that workout like crazy when it's pettit, right? But the thing is, that's not my goal. When I fuel those workouts, I'm trying to train my body to be able to take that in. That's actually going to have a way bigger impact than me trying to starve myself for a ride where I don't need fuel. That's not going to help me get faster when we talk 6 months down the road.
But you got really fat, right?
No, I actually lost weight because I was able to do more work. Mind blowing, right? So, because the thing with this is if your body can't take it in, it's a surefire way to ruin your race. Like if you can't take in 60 grams of carbs right now, and then you try to go do 120 grams of carbs, you are going to be racing to the porta potty and not the finish line. And that will be your day, right? Like it's just, and it's extremely uncomfortable. But if you start to train yourself and incrementally step up, and then it just becomes a part of it. Like my rule is if I'm pedaling, I'm eating. And that doesn't mean that every pedal stroke I'm taking something in, but I need to have a nutrition plan and I need to know what I'm taking in for every single time that I ride. Because if I don't do that, I have you noticed this too, Nate? If I drop back on that, it's hard for my body to then just go right back up to 120 grams again. Like I need some time.
Yeah, so I have no science to back this up, but what I think is happening is I think there are bacteria in your stomach that is really good at while you're working out at eating carbs. And the more you do feed it, the more those happen. And because it's different, like you can have a carb-rich diet in general, but if you don't eat while training, like it's different. So I don't know if there's a certain type of bacteria that does that, but I think it's if you don't keep it up, like you said, your gut flora can change pretty quickly, just in a couple of weeks, and then you'll lose it. And then you got to train it back up. Or what happens to me is I either feel extremely nauseous or I get crazy gas if I don't do it. And now I've kind of got this a good like amount where on certain days I do a little bit bigger for like 2-hour rides. I'll do like 100 grams per hour. 90-minute ride, maybe I'll do 100 grams the first hour, and the last hour I'll just do like a drink, but like a salt drink, a pH drink. So precision hydration. But I'm not going another 50 grams on that last hour because I have other days, like the next day is going to be 2. And then I get to eat a little bit more of real food afterwards. And I like doing that. So that's a balance that I found that's worked really well. And when I go do the really upper end in a race, I don't have any issues with my stomach. And I probably should still try to go a little bit higher, but it just feels, Dom, it feels amazing. Like Amber said, to be able to pass people at the end. And at stage 2, I came out and what's his face? I can't remember his name now. Noah was right in front of me on the single track. So I took 3 minutes out of him on the first climb, and then he went in the single track and he beat me by a lot because it's, technical. And then coming out of it, I saw him and I just blew by him, and I did, I don't know how many, 330 watts or something for the last hour, the last 30 minutes, and got to put another, I think 7 minutes on him in the last 30 or 40 minutes of the race, which is pretty cool to be able to have that kind of performance at the end of a race.
Yep, yeah. Absolutely.
And don't underestimate, I don't know if you're racing out there in Yorkshire, but if you are, and other people are bonking at the end of the race, boy, you can gain a lot of time, because if somebody's bonking, they can lose a lot of time, and it can happen really fast at the end of a race. So don't be that person, and just be the person who can be the one gaining.
This is something about Cape Epic. I'm actually worried about 2 people. It's Chad and Brandon. Brandon, because Brandon doesn't eat a ton of food, and I think he's getting better at it. But before, in his previous races, he's talking about, he would do a half Ironman, and he would say, I had a gel the whole half Ironman. And he goes, I did great until the last 3 miles. And then he was like walking the last 3 miles. Imagine. And Chad has been historically on long rides. Chad, you either get cramps or you bonk at the very end, and you have a big drop off in power, where before that you're doing great. So yeah. Chad, what are you going to do to address that during Cape Epic?
Exactly what I just described. I'm trying to figure out what my carbohydrate tolerance is. And right now it's low. And I know that I can only take on so much before I start to feel GI distress. So I'm trying to incrementally nudge that up. And it's not just happening on the bike too. I'm seeing to it that immediately after I'm having carbohydrate, that my diet is a little more carbohydrate rich. Just small changes, but changes that I suspect over time, maybe a couple weeks down the road, I can add that additional gel or a handful of more blocks, and I won't get that same discomfort. So it's a process.
I feel like it's a little bit like training, where my performance increase in this is I go into the discomfort zone. It's just like doing VO2 max intervals. It's got to hurt a little bit, and then your body's like, oh, I'll start doing this. I don't try to get it where every day is easy, or like, I don't feel nauseous.
I agree. There's a certain level of discomfort that you can work through. But honestly, I've got enough time that it's already uncomfortable enough to do most of what I'm doing right now on the bike without adding that on top of it. So one thing at a time.
And then, this is one good point to add with this. Cape Epic is in March, and Chad has been working at this already. So this shows that if you can't crack this nut, so to speak, right now, don't worry about it. Like, it takes time, and this is smart that Chad is working on it with such a long way ahead.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to working your way up in amount, pay attention to type, right? So maybe there are certain forms of carbohydrate that are easier for you to get down. Maybe you need to drink it in liquid form. Maybe I have a really hard time with bars and solid foods. The most solid food that I can really stomach are kind of like gummy or block type fuel. Those work really, really well for me. I can eat those all day long. I don't have much palate fatigue when it comes to those. I really like maple syrup too. Untapped maples is a great one.
Just going to say that between the UCAN Superstarch and the maple syrups, so I've got my slow carb and my fast carb, and so far that's been working quite well. I'd like to have more things to throw at it, because I don't know, honestly, geez, do they provide anything for us? I don't think they do, right? Aid stations?
Yeah, aid stations are stocked, at least.
And
I don't know what's with COVID, but yeah.
Okay, so as we get closer to that, I'll start to consider what they'll be stocked with and take a look at that.
And then for Brandon's going to have Amber. And I'm not worried about it, because I think Amber's going to like tell him to do stuff, and Brandon will listen. And he can eat. So I don't think it's an issue as long as someone's reminding him to eat, especially because for Brandon too, no offense to Amber, but Brandon's like a watt per kg higher than you. So a lot of it will feel easy to him. And I'm not sure he will be thinking about eating enough. You know what I mean? Of where it's just kind of, he'll be more concerned about the descent rather than eating food. But with Amber there reminding him, and I have no question that you will eat like a pro. By the way, the pros between stages, they eat so much, people.
Yeah.
This is like my third stage race where I've stayed in Airbnb with top level pros. They eat just as much or more than me. They're like
a lot.
They're like, oh, I feel so full, but I gotta do one more. And they're just like eating more, like another bowl of cereal. It is insane how much they eat. And when I've stayed with regular people, they don't do that.
Yeah, it's a marked difference. And so last point I want to make on this too is I think that there's a connotation tied to, if you're pushing really hard, it makes sense to fuel yourself. But if you're not, it doesn't, because you can make it through. You're not trying to make it through. You're trying to get through something with enough fuel so that your body isn't worn down for the next day when you're talking about a stage race. So that's why for Brandon, even though it doesn't feel tough, and that's why even at a race like Leadville doesn't really feel hard for the majority of that race if you're pacing it properly, until it really does. And then there's no way to recover. So those sort of that sort of pace and this connotation that a lot of people form are, so you're riding really hard, so you need to take that in. Or, it's a really long ride, so you need to take it in versus a short one. I promise you, Nino Schurter is not just drinking water. Kate Courtney isn't just drinking water during an XCO race. It's only 90 minutes, but they're still taking in carbohydrate. So we build a lot of these reasons, and I don't know why. We're so obsessed with starving ourselves instead of fueling ourselves and nourishing ourselves. And we build all these rules to kind of say, well, I don't need to eat here. I don't need to eat here. Let's all of us listening to this change that script. And instead of be people that are looking for reasons to starve ourselves, looking for reasons to nourish ourselves. And if we do that, we get faster.
There's two reasons. One is, I think, this may not be hold true for elite and for everyone. Some new research that Tim Pojakar was putting up, but the idea of doing a fasted aerobic ride can have aerobic adaptations that some people are chasing. So for Derek, for Dialed Health, that could be something, we've talked about this before, where he has no more time, and maybe his aerobic rides he's doing early in the morning without any food, and he can still recover, because that's the big thing. If you can't recover and it takes away from your intensity, you don't want to do that. So that's one side of it. But people will take that and say, well, this is the Nate aspect, right? If I don't eat during these little ones, what if I don't eat during my intense sweet spot in VO2 max? That means it'll just be better, right? And then you get into that trap of, well, your performance suffers and the next day suffers and your recovery suffers. The other thing is that we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, but most cyclists want to lose weight or lower body fat. And they think that if they don't eat carbohydrates, they'll burn more fat during their ride, and thus they will be leaner overall, which I know it makes, like, you write that part in paper, like, oh, I'm not doing this, so I'm going to burn more fat. But overall, we talk about kilojoules overall for the week and having a caloric deficit during the week of losing weight. And we've talked about it too, of the amount of protein you eat and all that sort of stuff, that if you fuel your workouts, you're actually farther ahead. You're doing more kilojoules. You're getting stronger. Your FTP is higher. Every time your FTP is higher, I don't know, do you guys notice this too? The more fit you are, the easier it is. Like your body comp just changes naturally. And it's just like a snowball that starts happening. Your FTP goes up and then your body composition improves, where it's really hard to keep, if your FTP is the same, to get your body composition improved without really limiting yourself. But when you get both sides, you get a lot faster that way. And it's kind of fun.
This is actually a point, and it's a bit of a critique for Derek actually on this, because a lot of the time you'll see on his Instagram that he'll be doing like a shred challenge where he'll basically be dropping down carbs as much as he can to try to get shredded. The reason Derek looks the way he looks, it's not because he did a shred challenge for 30 days. The reason he looks the way he looks is because he's managed to be able to do so much work with his body, whether it's on the bike or in the gym, for so long that sort of thing, when you're able to do all of that work, that changes body composition in a meaningful way. And that's the sort of thing that when you compound that months after months, that's where you really start to see a change. I mean, Chad, you've mentioned that too, like back in your day when you were really truly fit and you were winning races and doing all of this. Well, when Chad was Chad, right?
When Chad was like Big Daddy Chad. Yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah, exactly. Just wrecking shop on NorCal and Northern Nevada, right? So in those days though, Chad, you were doing so much work. You were training people indoors. You were training on your bike, doing that. You were racing a ton. And as a result, you were having pizza and beer, and you were in ice cream before races and after races.
All three, all the time.
And you weren't fat, right?
No, as lean as I've ever been.
Yep.
Yeah, because it wasn't often that I did it. I didn't plan my training. So for the fact that it's kind of shameful to admit, but I was training a bunch of people. A lot of people were coming in and out of my studio, but I was running a business first and foremost. So at the end of the week, the amount of training I did wasn't because I set out to do this much training. It was how much training I had to do to support the business. But a pleasant side effect of that was that I was really fit and I could eat whatever I wanted and I could race really well. And my watts per kg were only improving all the time. Yeah. So
seek to do more work. If you can do more work, then you'll get more fit. Work. That's it.
I remember, so quick story. This is how I met Chad. It is CompuTrainer Studios, which is like the pre-birth of TrainerRoad. And the TrainerRoad started because Chad charged me too much. It was $20 a workout. And I was like, I can't do it.
I had to eat, man.
I'm so glad. Well, if you would have charged me $2 a workout, this would not be here right now. So
and I wouldn't be eating pizza and ice cream. I'd be eating ramen and water.
Yeah. But Chad would jump on. I think my FTP when I first did it was like 222. And this is when I was training as a triathlete and we're going, and Chad would jump on and be like, this is my second workout of the day. And he would just like start out at 350 watts. And Chad has this, like, if you've ever seen Chad ride, this crazy still upper body where none of it moves and just his legs. And he's putting out 350 watts. And that's like, almost my sprint level power. And I'm like, who is this guy with these giant legs? He's like, he had a strong upper body too. And I was just extremely impressed that it was his second workout in the day, where me, like an hour-long trainer ride seemed like a huge, huge ask. And my intervals were like 180 watts. And he's just almost doing twice the amount and making it look easy. You remember those days, Chad?
Those were the days. I do remember them.
Those were the days.
They just hurt me these days. Should wait. On Dom's question, though, we only address nutrition. I mean, there are some other suggestions.
Good point. Yep.
So let's hit those real quick.
Gearing.
Anyone want to take gearing?
Gearing.
Yes.
Get the gears. All of them.
Yeah. Honestly, if you're gearing yourself out to the point where you're pedaling at a cadence that is far outside of what's you're used to, it doesn't even have to be far outside, just outside of what you're used to. And also, if you're pedaling at anything that's like, if you're saying 50 RPM or below, that's also where we start to get into a point where I personally consider it a bit unreasonable, right? Like, and yes, I would be that pretentious as to say such a thing on a climb, that it's a bit unreasonable, but it's just unreasonable. Yeah, these climbs are unreasonable, but it don't put yourself in a spot where you're just working so far out of what's familiar and also what your body is prepared for.
Well, yeah, and these days it's not as easy to get pulled into the trap of the ego-driven corn cob. I mean, my biggest gear is a 21 sort of nonsense. Finding appropriate gearing for really severe climbs is it's it is another example of low-hanging fruit, and probably one that Dom's not missing. But if you find yourself early in the ride, and this goes to my second point, is you need to figure out how to conserve earlier on. If you're falling apart later and you know your nutrition isn't the issue, you're probably pacing poorly or doing something else that's not lending to a strong finish. And gearing could be partly responsible for that. If, for instance, on all those other climbs, you have to mash at 50 or 60 RPMs to get to the top of it. That is going to take quite a toll on your muscles later on in the ride. But do recognize that anything you do earlier in a long ride is a form of pacing, and it's not pacing in the strictest steady state pacing sort of sense where I have a 40K TT and I need to pace at this rate the entire time. But instead, it's more about doling out those heavier efforts, and those heavier efforts are often obvious. You can think about the whole burning a match idea, but sometimes they're not as obvious. And gearing could be one of the less obvious ways of burning a match, where you have to grind and grind and grind to the top of a climb because you just didn't want to put on that 32.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I sorry, the Zoom interruption pattern. Oftentimes in pro racing, if we have a climb, I can think of a handful of particular stages in crits where there's like a steep, punchy climb, which you can big ring, but you don't want to do that early in the race. You can put out the same level of power in an easier gear at a higher cadence, and doing that earlier in the race, at least for the first half, or maybe even saving that big ring for the end. Those are things that you can do to really save, like just lower, it doesn't tax your muscles quite as much. And then in the end, you can really come in strong with a bigger gear. So if you're really struggling with the climbing later in a ride, I would suggest experimenting with lighter gears. You can still put out the same power, just at a higher cadence, and it can be kind of easier on your knees and tendons too. So it's worth a shot.
I want to talk about, let's get on the record right now about gearing size for different people. I want to do both for road and mountain bike, because this is, when you read about it on the internet, I feel like it's always ego driven. And there's always that person who comes in and goes, oh, I ride a standard 23 or 21, right? And that's all you need. Okay, so I'm going to be road first. This is for places that aren't flat. If you live in Florida, do whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. So this is like, you have hills, there's over 6% sustained, right? Those sort of thing. If you are...
If a freeway overpass constitutes a hill, just we don't skip forward.
Yeah. So if you are going to sprint for a win, so if you're just riding for fun, you don't need it. But unless you're going to sprint for a win, and basically usually just in a flat crit, is there any, do you need a standard? If you're a regular rider, like below 4 watts per kilo? I can't think of a reason.
I personally don't think you do.
I don't think you do either. I think the mid compact, that one is probably, you might be a road racer, but you also want to sprint a little bit, but you're not like sprinting at 40 miles per hour, because you can still sprint really fast with a 32 in the back. That is a really good range. And that's probably anywhere between 3 and 4 watts per kilo. That's going to give you a little top end and stuff. But if you're finding that you have really steep, long climbs, yeah, that's what I do too. Steep, long climbs, you should I would recommend in your 3.5 or below, or even 4 and below, and it's a really long climb, I think you should be doing, 1132 with a compact. Mm-hmm. Unless there's some reason where I sprint at 38 miles per hour, which I don't think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people could sprint with compacts based on the races that I've done against some top level people and still win.
How many times have we been beat by juniors with junior gears? Mm-hmm. In a 0. Sprint? Right. So
I'm just kidding. Me actually 0, because it does hurt them, because they can't sprint that fast.
No, but here's the thing. Look at them and look at how they sprint. Like, at least in our local region, we have really fast juniors that sprint very well with very, very hindered gearing, right? Like they have small chain rings and everything else. And we see this with track sprinters. We see this with sprinters and Grand Tours, everything else. They are not sprinting at 70 RPM. Yeah. They are sprinting at a really high RPM. And if anything, it's probably argued that all of us could do better with our sprint technique to get to the point where we can actually sprint at a higher cadence, right, Amber?
For sure. Track sprinters in particular use much lighter gearing than road riders, generally speaking. And I know a lot of top-level professional women who are sprint specialists win a lot of races, and they win races in the Pro Tour or Women's World Tour on compact gearing, and they do it with cadence.
Yep. And they're faster than you, bro. Right? Most likely, unless your name's Justin Williams.
Yeah, straight up. Sorry, Chad, you were going to say something?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing that leg speed is underrated. Yeah, you need to be able to crank out big watts, but you need to have fast legs too, or at least a nice balance between them.
Okay, I want to go into mountain biking now, cross country, because we had this on the forum thread, and this also is it's really about your terrain, and your watts per kg. And this, I think, is a lot of ego driven. So I wrote down on the forum, I said, if you're 6 watts per kilo, 36, you can run that and you're going to be fine. And I'm assuming a 1050 cassette right now. 5 watts per kilo, anywhere from a 34 to a 36, depending on terrain. 4 watts per kilo, 32 to 34, 3 watts per kilo, 30 to 32, 2 watts per kilo, 28 to 30. And now, so Shimano has a 51 in the back, or SRAM now has a 52. If you go to a 52, you can actually go up 1 chainring size, and it will be the same as if you had a 50 with the smaller chainring size. So the big thing about this, that people you can get up the hills, but we're talking about how fast you can race. So if you don't have a sustained fire road descent of 2%, and that's really the only time that I think the really big chain rings help, because there are other times if you're descending, you're not pedaling when you're on a negative 10% descent, is that when you're climbing, let's say you're climbing single track and you're climbing at threshold, which is very common. And then there's just this little pitch that's 15 seconds, but it is steep. And you have 2 choices. You can either go over threshold, right? And really big gear it. Or if you have more gears in the back, you can click down a couple and stay at threshold. Now, if it is a sustained workout, you guys have probably done this before, be at threshold in a TrainerRoad workout, and now kick up above threshold for 2 minutes and now try to finish that workout. It is so hard, right? You will put out less kilojoules in that time, because really going up the hill is how many kilojoules can you put out over the amount of time. And that's what equals average power. It's your average power that gets you up the hill faster, not how spiky it is. So on this situation, if you have an extra gear, and just for those little pitch ups, you can be more smooth and you can be more, you can put out more kilojoules over time. You'll go up the hill faster. So it's easy to say, hey, I'm so strong, I need a 36, and it feels good and it looks cool, but it might not. It might actually make you a lot slower.
So a couple things to consider with this. Number one, it's really easy to change chain rings on a mountain bike. It's 4 bolts in almost every case, and then it's done. So that's really quick and easy. So feel free to change them liberally. It's for me when I'm training on the road on my mountain bike, which is what I do. When I'm doing my TrainerRoad outside workouts, I'm almost always on my mountain bike. Yeah,
what about chain length? Do you have to change that though?
No, for me, going from a 32 to a 36, I don't have to change my chain length. So it's fine within that. It's within that realm. I'm sure it's probably not as perfectly efficient, right? But so keep that in mind. So it's easy to change them out, number one. And when I'm doing all of my outside workouts, I always have I put a 36 on, and man, probably a 38 would probably be better in most cases, because I don't do my workouts on really steep climbs. I do my workouts on flats and or consistent pitches, right? So it's fine there. But if I'm racing, I'm almost always probably going to be racing with a 34. And if I'm going to something and this is at 4.8 watts per kilogram right now. And at 4.8 watts per kilogram, I'm racing with a 34, except if I'm going to Canada to do single track 6, I'm going to put a 32 on there maybe, or maybe I just put a 52 cassette on the back. But one thing to keep in mind too is, so yes, when your chain wraps around a smaller cog or a smaller chain ring, there is more drag. I don't know how much that is though. That might be a fraction of a watt. It might be 2 watts. I don't know. But when you wrap around a 32 versus a 36, that 36, there's less bend in the chain, right? At least it's not as tight of a bend, I should say. But the real main reason a lot of people do this, and I think even riders like Nino run this and everything else, when they have a 36 or a 38 on their bike, the gears on the back that they spend the most time in with that chain ring give them the straightest chain line. And that's another thing that they go for. However, that also, I don't know if that's just dogmatic at this point or if there's actual data behind that, because we do know that modern chains don't deal necessarily like in a poor manner like they used to with aggressive chain lines. Like they're actually designed to have more flex in there. So there's a lot of things where I don't know, I don't have the data to be able to quantify the difference there, but that's kind of the reasoning behind why they do it.
Sorry, I was muted. There is, and it depends on, I forget who did it, but I think it's about a watt to be on a 1x to be kind of like off changed. And you are not Nino. Nino knows this on when he's doing his XCO races, knows the entire course, probably never ever going into the 50 or even one below, and probably never ever even maybe going into like an 11. Like they are so dialed and know exactly where they're going to be, and they're not going to be touching the end. So instead of being, as John's saying, is being on like closer to the small rings, that 36 just moves them a little bit back in the middle of the cassette. You are probably not like that. And you probably aren't looking at every course about what to do. And that is why you probably don't need a 36. Unless you're 6 watts per kilo, then you're probably fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So these are all gearing tips that can help you guys with going through and approaching steep climbs. Because if you don't have those things, doesn't matter how great you feel, it's going to be a really bad experience. And pacing as well. If you don't pace, then you're going to set yourself up for a poor experience. Okay, Doug's question, and then we're going to get into some rapid fire. Okay, he says, and this is just a fun one for us it's a pretty straightforward answer, but then it's going to be fun for us to actually jive on this a little bit here. So, says, I'm an Australian Masters racer, typically good at climbing road races. I'm not new to structured training or structured indoor training, but only recently joined TrainerRoad. Welcome to it, Doug. Says, I'm fairly time limited as I work shift work as an emergency department doctor. The ability to move workouts around day to day and time of day suits me well. I've always climbed well, and the longer the climb, the better. This year in January, COVID pending, I plan on racing National Club Team Time Trials, a 30-kilometer team time trial with 4 other racers. That's a big group, 5 for amateurs. A lot of the time, triple Ts don't end up including 5 athletes. So, it says, my limiter in races has typically been short explosive power, and I usually do better finding a groove and diesel engineering my way up a climb, meaning steady power. That's usually a person that rides somewhere sub-threshold and can do that for an extended period of time, refers to themselves as a diesel. Despite this, I usually suck at time trials. This notwithstanding, I'm excited to try a new approach to my cycling. My question relates to the training plans. I've been following the 40 KTT plan, but recently have started some team time trial style efforts, and I realized that a team time trial is a bit different power profile than a standard time trial. It follows more of an over-under style output. So I wonder if I'm better served in Plan Builder signing up for a criterium or XCO race, which is cross country Olympic, that focuses more on high-end power for short duration with shorter or limited recovery. Thoughts and tips. So first things first, in terms of the training plan recommendation on this one, in terms of what Doug should pick, Chad, what would you say on that one, at least on the plan selection side?
Or are we talking base build specialty or jumping right to? Okay, so
let's just yeah, as you wish.
Entire trajectory would be sweet spot base into a sustained power build into a 40 KTT plan, because it is still a time trial. Yes, you are doing over-unders, but a lot of that stuff's going to take place in the context of the build. It's not to say you can't weave a little more in, because now you're shifting your focus from an individual time trial to a triple T, in which case you do need to be able to go over. But you're still exposed to that even in an individual time trial, when you have to push up a little grade and you want to maximize the uphill because the downhill is not going to be suitable for pedaling, et cetera. There are situations where you're going to need to push a little above, and just over the course of a regular time trial, you're going to be put above threshold for brief periods here and there. So some similarity, but I do understand that a team time trial is a different animal, but most of the effort you're going to dole out isn't. Those little surges above are rewarded with time tucked in. So you get to go well below where you would have to reside on an individual time trial, because you get to rest, in your case, for 4 riders worth of pulls. Even if you're taking short 15-second pulls, that's a minute in the draft. Then you got to come out and hit hard again, 5%, 10% over threshold for that period of time, and then settle back in. So yes, they are over-unders, but they're pretty forgiving over-unders.
One thought that I have on this, if you're really having to surge and punch a lot in this team time trial experience, your team needs to be better marshaled.
Yeah.
So
I
like
think
it should always be tougher at the front, but if you're having to surge while you're in the draft and kind of like constantly adjust, that's a bit different.
Yeah. So I think Amber and I both have a lot to offer on this. I'm guessing she's done more TTTs than me, but I've done my fair share of them. I mean, my first riding experience was on a collegiate team. And the first race I did was a criterium, followed by a team time trial, followed by a road race. So it was a small stage race. So I had early exposure to this, and then I've just built on that experience ever since, to the point where a couple of years ago we went out and won the state title. And it wasn't we were the only team there, so we won. We beat some reasonably hefty competition. Didn't have the fastest time on the day, but we were pretty close, and we have our reasons for not having the fastest time. And we're going to talk about those right now, because a team time trial comes down to teamwork, plain and simple.
Mm-hmm.
You can field, in your case, 5 reasonably strong riders against 5 hitters. And if those hitters do not know how to work together and you guys do, you will beat them, because there is so much complexity to a team time trial. First and foremost, because of this complexity, you guys have to practice together. You can't figure it out on the day, not if you plan to be fluid. There are so many things that happen when you have, typically I'm used to 4 riders, you've got 5. So it's going to, I won't say exponentially, it probably won't change in complexity at all. But 4 riders does make it pretty complex. You have to know so many things about who you're riding with, their fitness up to the point, their fitness on the day, all of these things I kind of want to touch on as we go through this, but I'll turn it over to Amber for a second here.
No, no, I totally agree. It's so much about execution on the day, and there is so much that goes into this. I mean, we were just talking about efficiency losses from how tightly wound a chain is around a cog. You want to talk about efficiency losses? There are so many places in a team time trial that you can lose efficiency, and it is all about efficiency. And if your team can be super dialed and super efficient, you can beat teams that are way more talented, way more fit than you, for sure. It is 100% about team execution and team efficiency. So Chad and I have a bunch of tips that we wrote down here that we could start walking through.
Yeah, it's tag team this. So I'm guessing that anyone who's ridden mass start races, or even just ridden in a group, has done some form of pace lining, and most of the rules apply. This is obviously done at a higher intensity and it's done in a smaller group. But if you've ridden a pace line before, and you pull off into the wind, you pull off at the top of the hill, you pull off well before or after the turn, things like that definitely apply. So just maintain all that stuff. I'm probably going to skip around here, but echeloning is one. We have a local team time trial, or a local time trial, and occasionally we do a team time trial around it. And it's just around a lake. So, it's I don't know, a circuit is the tough word I'm looking for. So we know that course really well. And we know on this side, this is typically where the wind comes from. So, pull some of that information into it. And if you don't know that information, go explore the course. And there's a lot of things you can do online. There's a lot of things you can do in person, but never ceases to kind of disappoint me, but also make me chuckle a little bit, is when I'm with my group and we rip by a set of riders who are dead in line, even though the wind is totally broadsiding them. So each of them is suffering as much as the rider in the front, because they haven't figured out that the wind comes from the side. I need to be echeloned out. And in their defense, it's an open course, so there is traffic. So echeloning out does come with certain consequences. But the assumption is that I just need to stick to that person's will. Well, no, you need to hide from the wind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's a lot that goes on in a team time trial. There's a lot of cognitive processing that's going on during a team time trial, more so than in an individual time trial. So communication is a big one. And as Chad was talking about the wind, I was just recalling a lot of the team time trials I've done. We developed a shorthand for which way the wind is coming from, because if the wind is veering relative to the direction that you're riding, depending on how the course is oriented, if you're going through turns and you know that the wind is going to be shifting because you're making a 90-degree turn, it's great if you can all anticipate that. But honestly, there's so much going on that it really helps to have one person just calling out which way the wind is going. So it might be something as simple as like, pull off left, pull off right, and there's one person assigned to keeping track of that. And it helps save the cognitive load for everybody else, because you're still trying to I mean, you're on the rivet and still trying to make sure that you're not going to take out the whole team or gap anybody. There's a lot going on. So communication's a big one, and we are jumping all over the place here a little bit. But,
Amber, I have a question
along
on
those.
Amber, so do you have the people pull off on the wind side or on the sheltered side?
You want to pull off into the wind. And the reason for that is as somebody pulls off into the wind and they drop back along the line, as they are easing off the pedals slightly, not too much, but as they are easing off their effort, they are protecting everybody in the line from the wind as they go back and get back in the line. So again, a little bit of extra efficiency there goes a long way.
And that's something to definitely designate. Oh, it's okay. That's something to definitely designate beforehand. So decide on who the captain is. Don't expect that to magically come to fruition on the race course. So you'll know who that person is. The more you practice with your teammates, you'll really know who that person is. But when it comes to communication, that is super difficult because not only are you dealing with wind, ever-changing demands, and you're turning yourself inside and out, trying to hang on to whatever wheel's in front of you, especially if you're the weak link in the chain or just not the strongest. So on top of that, you're probably in an aero helmet, and hearing inside of an aero helmet can be very challenging. I mean, they cover your ears and they're not meant for communication. And we're not working most of us aren't using radios either. So the commands that you do issue have to be really clear, which is another thing to establish beforehand. And they have to be super short, because if you try to say more than 2 words, nobody's going to know what the hell you just said. It has to be off left, slow down, whatever you decide it is. These have to be simple, really easily distinguishable verbal commands.
Legion, when they do it, they just yell up, up, up. Like, it's
and
so easy to hear that
too. Yeah,
like, up, up, up.
Or left or right.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Off. You're the guy that just pulled off, and they pulled through too fast based on how recovered you are. You can't get back on, but they still need you because it's early in the ride. Off is a good one.
What I really appreciate is in like the Cat 4 races, whenever someone comes up on the left side, somebody yells left side, left side, left side, or right side over and over and over again every time. It really helps to know what's going on.
It's a Cat 4 thing.
Yeah.
This disappears many times when you get into Cat 2, Cat 1 stuff, unless the team is really doing their job. Well, one thing I just want to, something that Amber said, and I don't want to glaze over it, it's really important. A lot of the time in a time trial or in a pace line, forgive me, not a time trial, but in a pace line, when we pull at the front and then we pull off, it's like our job is done. So we just fully relax. And then it's all about me recovering while I get back onto the back. In a team time trial, it's not like that. At every point, you have some sort of responsibility within this. And it's never like you get to just fully free yourself of that responsibility. Pulling off into the wind means that when you finish that pull, you should not be on your limit, right? Because of the fact that you have to fall back in, deal with some wind, and then come back in. Like, you can't just run yourself to the limit with every single pull, because it's going to affect the team.
Every time you go to the front, you have to think about it in terms of you have 2 efforts to make. One is the pull that you make at the front, and the other is the acceleration that you're going to need to get back in the line. So imagine for a moment that you're at the front of the line, you're taking a pull, you're in the wind, you're definitely putting out more power than everyone else. As you pull off, you're going to drop off the power a little bit relative to everybody else so that you can move back down the line, which means now your pace and your speed is slower relative to everyone on the team. Well, you're going to have to then accelerate to match their speed in order to get into the draft again. And if you don't do that, if you don't time that well and you miss it, you don't want to be the one that's off the back of your team time trial chasing to get back on. So
it's
you
like
have
watching.
Yeah.
No, sorry, finish.
Oh no. So you take your pull, you drop back, and you want to pace how quickly you drop back to minimize the time that you're out in the wind, at the same time as not set you up to have to do a full-on sprint to get back into the draft. And that takes a lot of practice. So when you're on the front, you want to pull off before you think you need to, because you're still going to need to put out some effort to get back in the draft so you don't get dropped. And you want to be planning ahead for that every time. And if you, a good rule of thumb is if you're on the front and feel like you need to pull off, you probably waited too late to pull off the front.
Yeah. And one question I want to ask on that too, Amber, when you pull off the front and you're falling back, let's say you're at the front at 200 watts, for easy math, you're at the front at 200 watts. Are you dropping down to like 50 watts when you're going by? Like, so what's that reduction like? Because I think a lot of the time, as soon as we pull off, we tend to coast. And then that makes that acceleration really hard to get back in. You can disrupt the flow of the group. But what's that reduction like?
It shouldn't be a reduction in power. Honestly, if you're running it by power, you're setting yourself up for some certain challenges. It has to be largely about speed. And speed's going to fluctuate based on wind. But if you guys are pegged at 31, 32 miles per hour, you're in the front, right? You're in the front doing that. Or let's say you're the second rider back, that rider pulls off. Your job is to maintain 31.5 miles per hour, roll through at that same speed so as not to disrupt the pace. You get those hero pulls, or you get the rider who's just fitter than everybody else. That will destroy your team cohesion, and the entire team will pay for it.
What Chad said, I feel the opposite. If you're pulling the front and you want to maintain the speed and it's a slight uphill, that's where it destroys everybody. It's like a combination between speed and power for pulling out the front. You know what I mean? You hit a 2% grade and someone's like, I got to keep it at 30 miles per hour. And they suddenly do 500 watts and everyone's like, what are you doing?
You're absolutely right. I said wind affects it. I should have said grade affects it too. There are things that are going to affect the speed. So it's a nuanced affair. I mean, you have to understand that speed needs to be roughly here. How much I'm hurting associated with that speed needs to be roughly here. So if the road tips up, or suddenly the wind starts to gust harder, or it's coming from a less favorable angle, whatever, you need to be able to adjust on the fly. But if you're trying to go by power, saying that 400 watts is working for us and we're going to adhere to that, or 300 watts, whatever it may be, that's problematic. All of them are to a degree.
There's a lot of the execution of a team time trial. So training with power to get fit for a team time trial, awesome.
Oh, yeah.
On the day, and one of the things that you want to train with your teammates, it are things like this where you can't necessarily rely on the numbers. So as an example, when you pull through to take a pull, you want to maintain the overall speed of the group. You don't want to surge because it will kill everybody behind you. If you're the strongest rider in the group, your job is to take longer pulls, not harder pulls.
Exactly.
So the longer you pull at the front, the more recovery everybody gets behind you. That's good. You don't want to ramp up the speed and ruin the recovery for everyone behind you, because that will ruin the efficiency of the group. So as you're rolling through to take your pull, I find the easiest way to do that without surging on your teammates is to not shift. So you're in the same gearing that you were behind the person in front of you, and maintain your cadence. That by definition will maintain your speed. You don't have to stare at your computer. You can look up and see what's ahead of you, because now that you're on the front, not only are you responsible for the speed of the group, but you're also responsible for their safety. So again, minimizing the amount of things that you need to pay attention to, that's one way that you can pull through really smoothly. And then as you're coming off, again, really what you want to pay attention to is how quickly you're dropping back relative to your teammates. And then once you get to, let's say you have 4 other teammates, you're going to see 1 go by, 2 go by. When you get to the 3rd one, you probably want to stand up out of the saddle a little bit to get that extra acceleration, because once that 4th one is in your peripheral vision, you need to start moving over immediately to get into the draft. You don't want to wait on that. So you want to anticipate the 4th person to get into the draft. And none of that really has anything to do with power per se. It's all about reading your speed relative to your teammates.
Yeah, and that has to do with that point I wanted to make earlier, where you can look at it's an extreme example of it, but it's really easy to watch time and time and time again. Watch a team pursuit. When that 4th rider comes off and has to get back on, they have to nail it, because if even the smallest gap develops, the amount of effort they have to put to get back on is a huge amount of wasted energy, and they can only do that so many times. But they're so fluid at it, they really shine a light on how important it is to integrate perfectly every time and as rapidly as possible.
And this isn't just for team time trials. This is for any pace line. And Pete, I thought I was good at this. And then Pete saw me in a race video. And what I was doing is, to what Amber just said, is I would wait too long to accelerate again. So as I'm drifting back, and I would start pedaling once the person was like kind of in front of me, and then I'd have to catch back up, and I would surge to 400 or 500 watts. And that gives me, you think about how many times I would do a 500 watt, 10-second kick at the end of a race where I'm tired. Oh, that's going to just destroy me. And it did. And Pete says, you got to start pedaling, when you get that second person, now start making that speed differential smaller so that when it is time, you just slot back over and you're good, rather than having to do this yo-yo slingshot thing every time. And that happens all the time, right? You always see the last person, like, they kind of go off and they hit too hard because you're tired from the pull. To Amber's point again, you probably pulled too long because you're like, I want to do a good job for these people. And you're like, and you're calling back and you got to do another 500 watt kick. And it's just horrible.
I have two questions surrounding that very thing. Assuming you are that rider and you're not able to hold with the group. It could just be that let's assume the group's doing everything fine and you're just on a bad day, right? So you're not able to do that. How should I signal that? And then is it my responsibility entirely, or should somebody else in the team, like the captain of the team, be the one that's also keeping an eye on that? Chad, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's part of why you practice together, so you can kind of get a feel for who is the strongest rider, who's the best at orchestrating how we move, rider lineup in terms of rider size. We don't want to put the biggest rider on the smallest rider's wheel. Rather vice versa. There's going to be some overlaps that probably don't fit perfectly, but you can iron those out. And then this all is great in training, and you can maybe back it up with multiple training sessions, but on the day, you don't know necessarily that it's going to be that ideal. You might have one person who's having that bad day, or for whatever reason, missed the warm-ups, running late, is just not in the proper state of mind. So that's absolutely something that has to be discussed, and will also take shape over the course of the ride. You'll start to figure those things out, and you may even reshuffle order. You may recognize that if you know the course really well, we had this person pull for this long on this stretch because, it's a heavy headwind, they're the biggest rider, et cetera. But now that rider is the most tired rider. So we're going to have to figure out how to reorganize and to be able to maximize and hang on to this rider and use that rider at a different point in the course until you blow that rider up. Which brings me to a finer point, but a legit pro tip. If you are in the case of a 5-rider TTT, you know that it takes 4 to finish and you're on a bad day, or you suspect you might be, you got to know when to pull that ripcord. You have to know, because this happened in our 4-man TTT. 2 of us were on a bad day. So I'm watching him, he's watching me, and we're like, one of us has to finish with these 2 much faster guys. So fortunately I got out first and I got to, roll to the line, whereas he had to hobble to the line. But knowing that very thing, it might predispose you to quitting earlier than you need to, but do be clear on how many riders have to finish. And if you are the weak link, communicate that to the team.
I can just see Chad being like, see ya.
Good luck. I buried myself on that last one, and that was it. And as he rolled by, he had some choice words for me.
It's an extremely painful but unbelievably rewarding discipline. It's like the hardest I've ever ridden a bike is in a team time trial, and also like the most fun I've had in a race. But to that point, if you know that you're planning on losing a particular person, you still need to know when that person is going to be dropping off. And if you've already lost as many as you can, then you need to do everything you can to make sure that you're keeping everyone together. And that may look like one rider not taking pulls. If it means that that's going to help them stay on, it's better. I mean, even if it's just rolling through the front and then rolling off immediately, that 2-3 seconds of extra recovery can make a difference for other people. But you have to really be communicating with each other to know, is that going to be too much for that rider? Are we going to lose them? Because that's, when you get down to that point, that's really crucial. And then as you're pulling off the front and dropping back, if you've lost somebody, it's the people who are still in line. It's their responsibility to let you know, hey, you were expecting to count out four riders. Now there's only 3. So that second or third rider back should let you know, we lost so-and-so, or only 3, or last, like, I'm the last rider, you better get in the draft. You develop kind of a shorthand code with your team ahead of time, like we were talking about, where you want to have, for every scenario, you want to have a 1 or 2 syllable command or communication word that everybody knows what it means. It's going to be clear. There's a really big difference between no and go, and it's really hard to differentiate those 2 words in the wind. So you want to make sure, like Chad said, that they're short, they're distinct, they're things that you can speak and understand when you're on the rivet. But communication is huge. And then if you are that rider and you're dropping back, you have got it, and you can't afford to lose anybody else. You have got to let the team know. Yelling gap, again, whatever shorthand word you come up with as a team, that is critical. And it takes a lot of awareness. Again, there's a lot to pay attention to in this event. So it takes a lot of awareness. Everybody needs to be aware of each other and how they're doing.
I've wanted to do this is probably, I don't know if we should do it or not, but to do a group workout where we could do a team time trial. But so there's it's like offset. So John's pulling at one time, then Amber's pulling, then I'm pulling, and you would see each other suffering, but then you would be in that like a little bit under threshold spot as you're in the draft. I think it would be kind of fun to like rotate through with the team to be able to do that. Just a different way to do over-unders. You could do it as a team and kind of watch each person suffering. If you really wanted to get crazy, you could do it not in erg mode, in standard mode. And if Amber started pulling too hard, it would raise all of our behind, right? Raise all of our targets. We'd be like, Amber, what are you doing? Like yelling at her, stop it.
This
that could also be fun.
This brings me to the final point we want to cover on this, because we're going to get into some rapid fire questions. But 3-person team time trial from TrainerRoad. You get to build it right now. Who's on your team?
Me, Pete, and me. We did it with Brandon. Brandon actually slowed us down to Chad's. We were pulling on one, and Brandon, his pulls, because he was getting shelled on our draft, that his pulls actually slowed us down. It would have been faster without him. In Reno, people we have all these new pros, so probably like Ryan Standish, Pete, and I, or something.
I feel like Ryan, Pete, and Nate would be a great team.
That'd be a good one.
Yep. Big motors, big people as well. That's like, you don't want a person like me on Nate's team, because there'd be such a size and power differential that it would be really hard. It would cause problems. Yeah. I think for me, it'd be Brandon, JJ, and I. That would be, I think, like a really good. And JJ, he's one of our awesome support agents, and he lives over in China. He's extremely fit, but he's a similar build. I almost think like a similar build is one of the key things. Right, Amber? I don't know. Sorry.
Oh, totally. I've been in team time trials where I've had to follow very small people, and I usually get stuck in that position because I'm a strong time trialist, and so I'm the one that can handle the smaller draft. But oh man,
it just feels really like you're painful. Not. It feels like your pull is twice as long, because a lot of times you're so much higher up. Like your bike's getting a draft, but not your body. Like your body's getting 0 draft, and that's where all the drag is coming from. So you don't feel it at all. It's very, very annoying.
It's brutal. Yeah.
Chad, do you have a team that you put together?
Oh no, I actually agreed with the Pete, Nate, and Ryan. That would crush. Yeah. Those are just Amber. 3 big guys who put out big power, and as long as they can learn to work together, they do real well.
Who would be on Amber's team? Who'd you pick, Amber, for your team?
I don't know. I haven't given this much thought, but I will say whoever was on my team, we could win with efficiency for sure.
It'd be Ryan and Pete also, because Pete's like what, 6'1", 6? And
6'1", I think.
And Ryan's 5'11", and Amber, you're 5'11".
Mm-hmm.
That would be 5'10". That'd be what, 5'10"? Okay, so very close though. So I think that would be a very killer team.
Yeah. Okay, some rapid fire questions. First one is going to be a long question, but it has a simple answer, so we put it in rapid fire. But there's also a really cool part at the end, and it's part of the reason that we put it in. So from Francesco, he says, "Hey, TrainerRoad crew. First, I want to say thank you for for the invaluable programs, podcasts, and website resources. Been a member for about 2 years and have seen a ton of improvement. I'm a blind athlete looking to qualify for 2021 Tokyo. Way to go. That's awesome. And TrainerRoad has been a crucial part of this journey. So my question has to do with how to structure off-season base training. I've read the website and post about it." He's talking about the blog post that we have that's probably talking about traditional versus sweet spot base. He says, "And have the sweet spot base and traditional base programs. For context, my event is 30K TT, and his second event is a 75-kilometer road race. So for most of my training, I've done a high volume approach. I find that sweet spot base high volume is too much intensity for me and doesn't allow me to get the amount of volume I would like. It's pretty hard. That's like one of the hardest plans we have. High volume sweet spot base. You're really going to spend a lot of time at sweet spot. So it's tough." So he says, "Alternatively, traditional base seems like perhaps not enough intensity for me." So I'm going to fast forward through the rest of his question here until the end. His basic question is, can I combine the two? And the answer is absolutely you can. You can substitute workouts out. You can substitute the weekends for longer rides. Just make sure that if you have like a crucial, like a sweet spot workout that is working you through like a progression, like you realize that, okay, this week it's 15 minutes and last week it was 12 minutes. Pay attention to those progressions. Those are key. You don't want to skip that 15 and then next week you're at 20 and suddenly it feels like a chasm that you have to leap. So you can substitute out workouts, but try not to substitute the key ones that are at the intensity that you're really focusing on. So that's one bit of advice. You can totally blend them in and change that around. And with outside workouts, if you plan on doing them outside too, that's a great way to be able to do it. You can mix them around. Awesome stuff. But his question, I want to add this in here because hopefully the podcast network can help this. He says, P.S. Since I'm blind, I ride with a pilot cyclist on a tandem bike. I was actually going to reach out to you guys to see if you had any suggestions on cyclists who might be interested in going for Tokyo next year, since I know your network of cyclists is a lot more extensive than mine. I figured I would get this question in the meantime. And he says, thanks from Francesco from NYC. So if this sounds like anything that interests you, if you know of an athlete that would be interested or has experience in this, shoot us a message. You can do so where you submit questions every single week at trainerroad.com/podcast. And by the way, please keep submitting questions there. You do it every week and it's amazing. And let's just never stop that. It's great. So, okay, on to some more rapid fire. Why do road cyclists use such small bottles compared to what we use as triathletes?
Ego.
Well, there's a different reason for you, Amber, as a pro, right? Like
I was going to say feed zones and caravans.
Yeah. You're taking them on very regularly. And as a result, you don't need to have a huge bottle. You're just taking on small bottles somewhat regularly. So it's less weight to carry and that sort of stuff.
Right. We can always go back to the car and get more.
But most of us aren't like that. We don't have a car where we get a sticky bottle and whenever we want.
100%. So yeah, for most of us, it doesn't make sense. We just do it because that's what we see everybody doing. And that's what a lot of bottles are like. Triathletes don't have that ego and they prioritize actually performing really well instead of looking the part. So,
there are actually UCI regulations on bottles as well. So they have to be designed in a certain way so that if let's say somebody's bottle falls out in the middle of a course and you roll over it with your bike, they're designed actually so that the lid will pop off so that they're actually safer. And so there are some design constraints on the bottles as well.
So this is why a lot of the tax bottles and stuff like that, they don't seal quite as well. Like if you squeeze that bottle a lot, it can leak out. Mm-hmm. And then now it makes sense why I see all of them using those tax bottles, the elite bottles, that sort of stuff.
Yep.
But also, most of you are not in a UCI race.
Yeah.
I think what this person's talking about is the small bottle versus tall versus even a liter bottle. Some people might do. And
or the aerodynamic bottles that some triathletes have on their bikes.
Yeah, those are usually the aerodynamic ones are usually they don't carry much water.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're pretty small. But
yeah.
In general, the other one is mountain biking where you might not be able to fit a large bottle inside your frame.
Mm-hmm.
That happens a lot. But other than that, if you're getting limited by hydration, and you can be a little dehydrated, right, at the end of a race for sure. But I don't know, other than weight, I guess. But usually hydration, like falling off the cliff of not being hydrated, is way worse than like the extra 6 ounces of water. Weight.
Next question: who has the highest watt per kg at TrainerRoad? Nate, you looked into this, I think.
Yeah, we have a little leaderboard that comes out each week internally, and we've got Evan at 5.3 watts per kilo, JJ at 4.9, Jonathan at 4.7. But you're at elevation, John. So what's that put you at for sea level?
I'm like 4.9.
4.9. You better change your training if you ever want to hit 5. Damn. What are you thinking?
I know. Yeah.
And then Brandon. So Brandon right now he wrote down 4.57. He just had twins. So I think he's just doing easy rides, but he's at 5.3 at elevation. So he's probably the highest watt kg at TrainerRoad. But anyways, there's a lot of people in the high 4s, and I was at 4.5 at sea level, and then I fell off everything, and I just did a ramp test yesterday and I was at 340, although I don't think I'm very recovered from my stage race, so maybe I'm a little bit higher, but anyways, that's like 367 at sea level, I think.
Yeah.
Anyways,
next question: how do you not accidentally litter while riding? This is a good question with like dealing with gels and everything else. I have a system. I take the gel and I put it in my mouth, and I tell myself it's okay if it stays there for a while. That's number one. Like I don't rush the process. So I'm okay with just holding the gel in my teeth for a bit. And then when I try to never tear off the top all the way, I just tear off the top most of the way. And then after that, I have like and Amber, you mentioned this, you did this too, which I thought it was cool. Things that we never find out, that we aren't the only ones that do it. But I have like a whole deposit system, like different bank accounts. Like I have my feed pocket and then I have my empties pocket. And I even like when I finish a ride, I always look at my empties to make sure, hopefully I didn't drop anything. And then also that's a good systems check. Like I did take in 90 grams per hour. So I move it after I do it, I move it over to one side. But I'm weird and I always do everything with my left hand first because I still can't get over taking my throttle hand off. It just feels less natural. So my right hand almost always stays on. That's where my bottle cages. I always grab with my left, and Chad thinks it looks super weird when we ride together because I drink with my left hand. So, but that's what I do. I just don't rush the process. That's like the main thing
lefty.
how I don't litter. Oh, you do, Chad?
I do actually, yes.
Look at that. That's why you're so awesome.
What I think you do is you have a phone without a case, and you learn not to drop stuff when you have a phone without a case. That's pretty much it. Like you don't rush it, and you make sure you push it all the way in your pocket, and then the empty and clean is really important. But other than that, you just take an extra half second, and I don't think I've ever littered. But yeah, it's not hard not to drop something. Just don't drop it.
I think also accidental here too. I mean, it's very possible that we've all littered and not realized it, but being conscientious is probably the main thing. One thing I'll add is I do the same thing as Jonathan. Like I have an inventory system where I know how much I want to eat on the ride because I know how long I'm going to be riding. And this kind of goes back to our earlier question. I'll actually I'll calculate, okay, how many hours am I going to ride? How many grams of carbohydrate do I want to have per hour? I'll lay out all the stuff that I want to eat, and then I'll cut the tops off from all of them. I'm talking about like gummies and blocks and things like that.
Not gels.
Not gels, but I'll cut the tops off all of them and then put them in my pockets. So number one, it's easier to eat them and I don't have to tear anything off. I've already thrown that part away. And then when I finish the container or the bag part is a little bit bigger and easier to handle. And I can make sure that that goes back in my empties pocket. And by cutting the tops off all of them, I'm committing myself to eating all of the carbohydrate that I had planned to eat. And then I'll usually divide it up into two pockets. So one is for the first half of the ride and one is for the second half of the ride. So I know that if I'm coming up on halfway through my ride duration and I haven't finished my right-hand pocket, I better get on that because I still have to finish what's in my left pocket too. So there's just a little bit less material. And then again, like these guys said, taking your time and just being really, really intentional about where you're putting your wrappers.
Amber has grams per hour and grams per pocket. It's like a next level measurement. Next one. Oh,
and I have a happy halfway for grams of carbohydrate.
There we go.
We said that a lot in our group workouts.
Yep.
It's awesome.
Next one, we're just going to do two more. How do I adjust my derailleur so it quits making so much noise? Answer number one, take it to a bike shop. Answer number two, get access. I'm joking, but it's just so amazing. Like there's a tiny little button, you hold it down and then you just push it in one direction or another. It's so nice and you can trim it per gear. And I never ever have a chain that makes any sort of noise, and my life is incredible as a result. Like I love that.
But you can't trim it per gear. It's just one trim section.
Nope, trim it per gear. It's sweet. You can trim the position per the gear position. It's so cool. So it's awesome. Helps a bunch. That's why if you have one noisy gear, you can change it around. So there's that. And then the other side of, things, if you do have a mechanical drivetrain and for some reason you can't take it to a bike shop or something else like that, wherever the gear is that's making noise, like first things first, make sure your limit screws are adjusted. Next thing, it's just going to come down to cable tension. It's that simple. So get down to your smallest cog, shift up slowly until you find a gear that's making noise. When you find the gear that's making noise, move that barrel adjuster until it stops making noise. Then go back down and back up through, and you've probably fixed it.
It might be nice just to buy a new hanger too. They're pretty cheap. For stage races, I'm bringing a hanger for each day. I know that sounds excessive, but I bent mine twice I probably bent mine every day that I didn't crash, but it messed it up. And they're like $10, $15 or something. And you would probably go through them, especially if you're a mountain biker. The lifetime of your bike, you'll probably go through enough hangers if you're like me. Love to crash.
For sure. Final and extremely important question. Is Beers with Chad ever coming back?
Chad?
I don't know. I'm not even in charge of this matter. I just show up and do my job.
You can do it anytime you want, Chad. I'm expecting a live notification from TrainerRoad at like 2 a.m. one day. Be like, what's happening? Just Chad drunk. Hey, everybody. Everyone in Europe and Australia is like, yes.
That would be hilarious.
He's going to like call Amber, but not call her, just say it on Instagram Live. Amber, pick up.
Amber.
Where are you, Amber?
Okay, I will say it is coming back. And I think it's going to come back. Stay tuned to our Instagram because I think it's going to come back. I will just say within the next 60 days, we will have a Beers of Chad. So, and special occasions, it will still come back. You can count on that. I'm not sure that we will hit that frequency because I feel like we were Neo from the Matrix. Like we dodged all the bullets for a long time and then one of them got us on the leg sort of a thing. We never got the one on the leg. We got out early. So we don't want to do this.
Muppets, hello.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, it will come back.
I really want to do one after Cape Epic with all of us and some way to get where all of us are on it at the same time. That would be very fun because I'm sure we'll be ready to unwind.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. The best thing you can do to help this podcast is to send people to trainerroad.com. We have tons of great stuff there. They can use stuff on there without even signing up and become a faster cyclist already. Strength training calculator, plan builder, all that stuff. They can check those things out. So send your friends there, help them get faster, because if they're faster and they're riding with you, that will make you faster too. And you'll have people to do group workouts with, which is awesome. So do that, review the podcast, submit questions at trainerroad.com/podcast, and check out the Successful Athletes podcast as well. Tons of homework stuff, but we appreciate you all. Thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Aaron. Awesome.
Some big cheers for Beers with Chad.
Oh, yeah. People. Did you?